Well, hello there, little masters, and welcome once again to the Prancing Pony Podcast, where tonight, the good stuff is going to make you feel a longing for the great sea.
West to Hall, my friends. I'm Shawn Marchese, the real-life Lord of the Mark, and I'm here with the man of the West, the Aragorn to my Éomer, Alan Sisto.
Thank you, Shawn. Well, folks, tonight we come to the beginning of the end of the Silmarillion with Chapter 23 of Tuor and the Fall of Gondolin. And as promised, we also want to dive into the deeper prequel story of Tuor and his coming to Gondolin from the Unfinished Tales. But a funny thing happened along the way to Gondolin.
Yeah, it turns out we had so much good stuff in Unfinished Tales, we've decided to devote this entire episode to that.
That's right. Truth is, there's just so much here. And in particular, some of the most beautifully descriptive prose in all of Professor Tolkien's works. So we just had to share it with you.
You're really not kidding about that. I mean, there are just so many moments in this tale particularly that just give me chills. And, even though what we're reading tonight corresponds to just the first 2 pages of Chapter 23 in the Silmarillion, but, it's 30 plus pages here, and there's just really not much reason to go into the Silmarillion version when we've got all this plus more here. So to repeat, and just to make it clear, this episode is going to cover just the story from Unfinished Tales. So it's up to when Tuor reaches Gondolin, not the fall of Gondolin.
Right.
But if you're anxiously awaiting the story of the fall of Gondolin, we do have some good news, don't we, Alan?
Well, if you're anxiously awaiting the story of the fall of Gondolin, maybe there's a problem.
What is wrong with you?
What is wrong with you? It's a beautiful place.
It's a great story. Come on. It's an exciting story.
Well, since we told you in our last episode that we would cover both this week, and since we're really sorry we didn't, even if we think you'll be glad we didn't rush it. Man, I've digressed like 3 times just in one sentence. Enough rambling. To make it up to you, we are not going to make you wait 2 weeks for the rest of it. We are going to give you a bonus episode instead. Episode 42 of Tuor and the Fall of Gondolin will be out just 1 week from today, Sunday, May 28th.
Yeah, and we are sorry to have to make you wait even 1 week for that, but we're not sorry that we get to really dive in and give this Unfinished Tales material the
full Prancing Pony podcast treatment. I got to play with my toys every now and then.
Very well done.
Thank you, sir. So before we begin, Shawn, does old Bartleman have anything in his bag for us tonight?
He does. Yeah, we've got a fun one here from our friend Badger Brock in Sacramento, California. He wrote in.
Good old Badger.
Good old Badger wrote in saying, Master Butterbur, an innkeeper such as yourself must be well acquainted with the sleeping habits of many types of folk. While you may have had very few, if any, of the fair folk visit your establishment, I thought one of your many visitors may have shared with you their observations of the elves sleeping, or not sleeping, as it were. So first of all, points to Badger Brock for courteousness. He's so polite and well-mannered. I can only assume he's been spending a lot of time with dwarves.
Was he equally polite when he pointed out your mispronunciation of Belagost? Anyway. Ghost. I do think I need to clarify something, just in case Bartleman's ethics are in question. I don't want people to get the wrong idea. Bartleman does not watch his guests while they sleep. That's creepy.
No. Yes, absolutely not. No, the Prancing Pony is strictly a quality establishment. But we do collect lore. And since I've just recently tackled the question of how elves smell in a Prancing Pony Pondering last month, I suppose it's only fitting that we, with their noses. But since I tackled that last month, I suppose it's only fitting that now we move into a discussion of how elves sleep.
Thank you for that obvious answer.
You like that?
That was great. Well played, sir.
How do they smell? Terrible. Anyway, all signs, I would say, seem to point to they don't sleep, at least in the way we consider it.
Okay.
And 2 passages are coming to mind for me from The Lord of the Rings that describe Legolas and the way he sleeps. Or his version of sleep. And both of these passages are in the 2 Towers. This is Book 3, Chapter 2, the Riders of Rohan chapter. So the first passage I've got says of Legolas, he could sleep, if sleep it could be called by men, resting his mind in the strange paths of elvish dreams, even as he walked open-eyed in the light of this world. So that's one. And then there's another passage later in the chapter, as night falls and Aragorn, Legolas, and Gimli are on the edge of Fangorn Forest, and Gimli's on watch, and Aragorn goes to sleep, and then it says, Legolas already lay motionless, his fair hands folded upon his breast, his eyes unclosed, blending living night and deep dream, as is the way with elves. So there is There's a kind of sleep in those two passages. If sleep, it could be called by men, I think is a really key passage because the fact that Tolkien says that tells us that it is really something different from what you and I consider sleep.
Right.
Or what we considered sleep back before we had small children and didn't know what sleep was anymore.
What is sleep? Yeah, seriously.
Yeah. But to me, it seems like it's something voluntary. It seems to me like Legolas can sleep if he chooses. He doesn't seem to need sleep the way other characters do. There are a couple of other passages I found when I was looking into this.
Like Commander Data. Commander Data doesn't need to sleep.
Well, he's a robot, isn't
he? Yes, he is.
You are now embarrassing me with the minimal knowledge of Star Trek I have.
You know, I have a minimal knowledge of Doctor Who that didn't stop me from pretending to know what you were talking about.
There you go.
Anyway, so yeah, you're right. It does seem voluntary.
Maybe we should cut that, and I should pretend like I know what you're talking about.
No, I think we should leave it perfectly fine as is.
Fine.
All right. Hey, we had to leave my Don LaFontaine digression last episode. We can leave this.
All right, fair enough. But moving on to another passage. In The Hobbit, there's the guard and the butler in Mirkwood who get drunk on the king's wine.
Good stuff.
Yeah. And so we know that elves can sleep when they are, let's just say, chemically impaired.
Let's say.
Yeah. But then I looked in the Silmarillion, and I could not find any description of elves literally sleeping. There's, lots of other creatures sleeping. Certainly, I think there's a sleep of Arda, sleep of all the animals and the plants of Arda. There's references to the sleep of Ilúvatar before the awakening at Cuiviénen. Okay. But I mean, that's a metaphor, right?
Well, right.
That's.
Yeah, that's their pre-existent state, right?
Right, exactly.
Or pre-conscious state.
Pre-consciousness, yeah. They dream a lot, but we see Legolas dream in that passage in Lord of the Rings in that sort of half-waking
while he's
sleep.
walking around.
Right. So that doesn't
driving his car and texting.
Yeah. That's pretty common in Texas too.
Yeah, sadly.
When Miriel let herself die, she seemed to sleep. So clearly the elves knew what sleep looked like. And then there's, lots of references to rest from weariness in the Gardens of Lorien. But I couldn't find anything, of elves just sleeping. And I mean, that's in the Silmarillion. I mean, the Silmarillion is just
all
chock full of elves.
All
obviously.
Elves all the time.
Yeah, it's kind of like a cosplay convention. So here's how I interpret all of this. I think I think where I've landed on this is I think just like dying, elves don't need to sleep under normal circumstances. I think under, if they're extremely exhausted or if they're injured or if they're under the influence of the good stuff, they probably need to sleep to heal their bodies and regain some mental clarity. And I think that's why we see a connection between rest and healing and dreams and visions with Irmo and Este, right?
Yeah, that makes sense.
But I think I don't see that it's as necessary for them. I mean, I think ultimately, I guess you could say they sleep for the same reasons we do, to rest and heal themselves.
Right.
Yeah, but I think just they're just generally built tougher than we are, so they don't need to sleep as much as we do. And in fact, there's actually some passages in the Unfinished Tales story we're reading tonight. I'm not sure if we're going to be reading this passage specifically, but there's some things in there that show that Tuor gets really tired on the road to Gondolin, and his elven companion is a lot hardier. And so when Tuor sleeps, Veronwë doesn't. So I don't know. That's kind of where I've landed on this one. I'm curious if you've got any thoughts on it.
Well, our listeners have said that we need to disagree more often. So
let
me throw in a couple points.
That's something other than Star Trek?
We'll throw in a couple points to mix it up a bit. Though, truth be told, I think I actually agree with you that they sleep, and those are air quotes for the folks not listening to video. They don't have to sleep as frequently or for as long as men do. But I got some quotes for you that I think make me think, at least, that they do sleep a bit more than we might otherwise believe. First up, I want to come back to the chapter here in the Silmarillion of the Sun and Moon. Lorien and Este were concerned that sleep and rest had been banished from the earth, so much so that Varda ended up allowing a time where the world would still have twilight, right, a shadow. Now, two things about that. The passage separates sleep from rest. Sleep and rest had been banished. So you could rest without sleep, and you could sleep, well, presumably you could sleep with rest, but not without.
Yeah.
But that rest was something separate. So you could get rest without sleep, but sleep was something they still did. And this was, of course, before men came about, so they must have been talking about elvish sleep. I mean, I guess they could have been talking about animal sleep, but something tells me that because they're talking about dreams as well, that they were concerned about elvish sleeping patterns.
Okay, yeah, I didn't think about that, Pastor. I
don't know.
I missed that one.
It's not explicit. It's one of those things where you kind of have to make an inference. And I'm going to do another one of those. I'm going to make kind of an argument by analogy. There's also the fact that Tulkas slept because he was weary and content.
Oh, yeah. Yes.
Way back in chapter 2.
Yeah.
and if a Vala needs to sleep from time to time, it is hard for me to imagine that an elf doesn't. I could be wrong.
That's a good point.
So
that's a good point.
But I'm going to try to argue a little more clearly.
But again, he was under the influence of something that night.
Well, yeah, I guess you could call hormone release a chemical impairment.
Yeah. Or maybe just exhaustion. But no, that's a good point.
Maybe.
Yeah.
Well, I don't know. Tulkas strong.
That's true. That's a good point.
In Fellowship of the Ring, though, boy, I'm going to get in so much trouble for that one of these days. There is a moment in The Ring Goes South, and the text says that it was Sam's turn that day to take the first watch, but Aragorn joined him. The others fell asleep. Then the silence grew. Now, I know that's arguing both metaphorically and literally from silence, but it does seem clear from the text that only Sam and Aragorn were awake. We get something real similar later in Moria. One by one, the others fell asleep. Frodo was on guard.
Oh, wow. Yeah, that's a good catch.
So, yeah, well, an e-book and a search engine, really, are all you need. You, too, can host a massively successful podcast with an e-book and a search engine. No,
yep.
I can't. You can't. Go home. Don't do it.
Maybe Legolas was just pretending to sleep, though.
He could have been. But
why? I mean, why would he do that? Really,
but this next passage,
silly right now.
I was letting you fall into that trap because I wanted to lull you into this false sense of security. Because in the Two Towers, the three hunters come upon the grass of Rohan. They've just gotten down out of the pathless hills, and they're into that deep grass. And the air is beautifully described as if spring was already stirring. So Legolas breathes deep, and he says that this green smell is better than much sleep. Now, if you ask me, that sounds like somebody who knows how good much sleep really is. So
it sounds like somebody with small children.
Sounds like exactly, because I know what better than much sleep is, and the answer is nothing is better than much sleep.
Well, yeah, I mean those are good. I missed all of those. Those are all good points.
Well, and there's one more, because that's what I do to you. I lull you along and I smack you. You said there weren't any You said there weren't any references to elves sleeping in the Silmarillion, but there actually is one. In Chapter 13 of The Return of the Noldor, Turgon and Finrod are journeying south along the river, Sirion, and the quote from the book says, "And as they journeyed, night came upon them beyond the meres of twilight beside the waters of Sirion, and they slept upon his banks beneath the summer stars. But Ulmo, coming up the river, laid a deep sleep upon them and heavy dreams." So it seems to me they slept naturally when night came upon them, but then Ulmo came along and laid a deep sleep on them when he showed up. So...
Okay, I will give you that one. All the others I think could still be in question, but that one, that's a good one. So
yeah,
all right,
good stuff.
Well, but probably still don't need it as much as we do.
No,
but,
I think you're right. I think you're right.
I think I misspoke when I said they don't need it, or they definitely probably just maybe can go longer.
I think you're probably right. Like everything else, they have more endurance, they have more strength. They're not going to be tired after, an 8-hour shift or after watching the kids for 30 minutes.
And that's why it's interesting where, all the examples that I found were sort of in reference to elves in relation to other creatures, weren't they?
Right.
As a comparison to
it's
other
a
creatures.
Relative thing. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Well done.
Okay. Well, right on. On with the discussion then. Before we begin, we should probably do a little bit of background. Because we've come to the Fall of Gondolin, which is the third of the anchor stories of Tolkien's Legendarium. Mm-hmm. But unlike the Beren and Luthien story or the Children of Hurin, we don't have as many different versions to sort through. So, Shawn, would you take us through the history of this one?
Yeah, I can do that. Interestingly, since you compared it to those other two anchors of the Legendarium, Tolkien himself called Beren and Luthien the kernel of the mythology, and he called the Children of Hurin the germ of the mythology. I really looked for an agricultural metaphor for the Fall of Gondolin, but I couldn't find one.
The Horn of Plenty?
There you go. There you go. But it was one of the first three. We know
the
that.
Reaper.
Oh, yeah. We talk
anyway.
about Reapers later, don't we?
Yes, we do.
Well, all credit to Christopher Tolkien for the summary that I'm about to give, because he actually lays it all out really nicely in the intro to this chapter in Unfinished Tales. I'll just sort of summarize his summary. I'll start with a quote from Christopher Tolkien. He says, "My father said more than once that the Fall of Gondolin was the first of the tales of the First Age to be composed, and there is no evidence to set against his recollection. He declared that he wrote it out of my head during sick leave from the army in 1917.
Wow.
And at other times he gave the date as 1916 or 1916 to 17. In a letter to me, he said, I first began to write the Silmarillion in army huts, crowded, filled with the noise of gramophones."
Wow.
So now you
What
get
a
this
vision.
very vivid image of him
Yeah.
writing the Fall of Gondolin,
In
on sick
army
leave.
huts on the
Yeah.
front of the Battle of the Somme.
Yeah, that's an amazing image now, knowing, some of the things we've been hearing about the stuff that happened on the, at the battlefront there.
Well, actually, now that I think about it, the noise of gramophones, maybe it was the huts in the training encampments where he was still on.
Oh, that could be. Yeah, they probably didn't have gramophones out there in the trenches.
Yeah.
But well, so at
Either
least we
way.
know the timing.
Yeah.
I mean, certainly it was not far.
No.
Not far from the sense of war all around him.
Yeah.
And so we've got a clear picture of the timing there, that it was written around 1916 to 17. That is really early.
That
if
is.
you remember, the Tale of Tinuviel, which was the first version of Beren and Luthien, was written around 1917.
Mm-hmm.
And then the Children of Hurin actually didn't become its own story until the Lay of the Children of Hurin in 1918.
Which is the first version of that story. Right.
Right. So this does seem to be the first of those three works, if you if you take that 1916 date as the possible earliest date. And so the version that we're talking about here, when we say the Fall of Gondolin, is actually the version in the Book of Lost Tales. It's in the Book of Lost Tales, Volume 2.
Mm-hmm. Which is the second volume in the History of Middle-earth series.
Correct, yeah. Christopher goes on to tell us that text was edited quite a bit in 1919 and 1920. Tolkien actually read it to an essay club at Exeter College in 1920, which had to have taken some guts to stand up and read this story about the fall of this fictional city that you've written about. And then sometime around 1920, he wrote a poetic version, and there's a few lines of that included in the Lays of Beleriand. Not much. He only wrote about 130 lines, and very little of that has been published in the Lays of Beleriand. I think, thinking back to some of the notes, I think Christopher didn't really seem to think that it added much to the existing prose version, so he just kind of, and I guess it was just very fragmentary, so he just kind of left it, held it back.
Well, that makes sense. And then, the next version was written sometime between 1926 and 1930.
Right.
Christopher says that it was brief and compressed, and it was going to stand as part of the Silmarillion, and was later changed to bring it into harmony with the altered conceptions in the other parts of the book. So, but then finally around 1951, after The Lord of the Rings was mostly written, but before it was published, Tolkien began work on a totally new version called Of Tuor and the Fall of Gondolin. And in this one, I'm going to go ahead and grab another quote from Christopher. He says, "Deeply changed in style and bearings, yet retaining many of the essentials of the story written in his youth, Of Tuor and the Fall of Gondolin would have given in fine detail the whole legend that constitutes the brief 23rd chapter of the published Silmarillion. But grievously, he went no further than the coming of Tuor and Voronway to the last gate, and Tuor's sight of Gondolin across the plain of Tumlatin. To his reasons for abandoning it, there is no clue."
Yeah, that's a good quote. And that's the version we're going to be reading from today.
Yeah.
And it's now published in Unfinished Tales. Christopher changed the title to Of Tuor and His Coming to Gondolin for this publication because, simply because this account never actually gets to the fall. So it would be a little bit misleading to call
Just
it
logic,
that. Yeah. And I remember, I think it's the same area where Christopher says I think it was in the Book of Lost Tales that Christopher Tolkien said that the abandonment of the story was one of the saddest facts in the whole history of incompletion.
I'd have to wholeheartedly agree.
Oh, completely. Yeah. I mean, as I said, 2 pages of the Silmarillion is actually spread across 30 pages here. And there's just so much detail, so much thematic impact.
Yeah.
It's just heartbreaking to think of what we missed out on when
agree.
Tolkien didn't do this whole thing as a novel.
I know. I mean, I read the Children of Hurin and compare it to the story we just did with the chapter out of the Silmarillion, and I just can't even imagine what the full novel version of this would have been like.
Yeah,
other than just amazing.
just completely incredible. Yeah, it would be fantastic. So, as it stands, the only complete version we have of the Fall of Gondolin is the version in the Book of Lost Tales. But as with everything in the Book of Lost Tales, it's just so different that it's just not compatible with the later legendarium. So,
it really isn't.
At the risk of trying to be too pithy about it, I feel like we have to be satisfied with the little bit of soup that we have before us.
The fairy beyond fairy stories reference.
Yeah.
Well played.
Yeah, and just we'll have to read the recipe to imagine how good the rest of it might have been. But
indeed, I guess the hope of getting that third piece published someday as a standalone novel, like we're getting Beren and Luthien this year, is probably a hope that's never going to be fulfilled.
It seems unlikely. I mean, I'm with you. I'm with you. I would love to see it, but it just, from what it sounds like is available to him, it doesn't sound like there's enough for him to comfortably. I think he would just have to invent too much.
Yeah, and I know he seems to be not exactly comfortable with doing that for big chunks. So and I can't blame him. Talk about the pressure.
Yeah, no kidding.
So, well, let's go ahead and get into this then. Thank you for walking us through a little bit of that, and I was able to throw in a little bit of there as well. But I'm glad we could look at the history. Before we begin, I want to recommend to folks that you pull up Loader Project, LOTRPROJECT, loaderproject.com. This is the website we've had you look at before. Go ahead and navigate your way to the map of Beleriand. I believe you have to click on Maps or Map of Middle-earth and then Map of Beleriand. Very helpful here because we're going to be traveling in areas of the map that haven't seen a lot of action, at least not lately, and it's going to really be helpful to track Tuor's journeys. So
that's a really good point. I've just done the same thing myself.
Yeah, super useful. So because, like I said, these are areas I was like, he's going where? Wait a minute, he what?
Yeah,
I don't remember this place.
Yeah, because this is all those areas off to the west.
Place.
Nicely done. These are all those areas off to the west of the map that we just haven't really seen.
We've been spending so much of our time, south of Dorthonion, around the River Sirion, but certainly not the northwest. And here we're going to be spending time in Dor-lómin and Hithlum and Hevrast, and we haven't seen this stuff in a long time. So definitely want to keep that up and handy. So
Yep.
Well, the chapter starts out with his birth, and we're not going to spend a ton of time on that because we've talked about Rían before, and how she was wandering after her husband had gone off to this battle and not come back. She leaves Tuor to be fostered and goes.
I think it's here in Unfinished Tales that we see that she was distraught. Right, that's where that word is
used.
This
is where we brought that in because we talked about it a second time when we realized we'd kind of oversimplified things. So she said, "Look, I got to go look for my husband," and one of them tells her that, "I'm sorry, he's dead." And so she gets up, walks away, finds the Howden and Dingen, and lays herself down and dies. But the elves did what they were supposed to do. They cared for Huor. I'm sorry, for the son of Huor, for Tuor. We get a little physical description of him. Fair of face, so he's a handsome little guy. Blonde hair, golden haired, after the manner of his father's kin, and he became
definitely
strong.
Takes after the House of Hador. Yeah,
exactly. Very much your House of Hador guy. Different from Hurin and Turin in that regard.
Yeah, from Turin. Yeah, and remember that he's got as much of the House of Beor in him as Turin does.
Oh yeah, they have the same blood.
Their family trees are they're parallel to each other in terms
of
who married who. He just happens to take after the House of Hador more, which I think is key. The physical description, I would say, matches the temperament, and we saw a little bit of that with Gelmir and Arminas in the Turin chapter.
We'll get to that tonight too, as well, because we get to see Gelmir and Arminas again. But we get that physical description. He becomes strong and tall and valiant, very House of Hador, right over all over the place, and that he ends up with lore and skill no less than the princes of the Edain. So. It's just kind of useful to know.
Wisdom, a lot of wisdom to him.
Yeah,
just
absolutely.
He's one who seeks wisdom and knowledge, and I think that's one of the things that endears me to him.
Agreed. And he's raised by the elves, just like Turin, but he gets the advantage, I think, of being raised by the elves from birth. And that is a difference, but it's a pretty significant difference, I think, in terms of how it shaped his outlook, how it shaped his early years, and kind of maybe how he approached certain problems. He didn't have Morwen
right.
Always giving him the darkest answer possible.
Right. That's an interesting thought. And, Morwen, certainly we've talked about the influence she had on Turin, just Dor-lómin in general.
Yeah.
Well, I guess Tuor was in Hithlum, which is not far off geographically, so I guess it's probably similar climates and stuff. But I don't know, Dor-lómin, even before it was overtaken by Easterlings, just seemed like kind of a rough place to live. I don't know why that is.
Well, yeah, no, the Beleriand was where you wanted to be,
Yeah.
But yeah. So as he ages, we're going to kind of skim. We got so much to read tonight that we're gonna skim this first part. We're going to fly through lightning pace this first little bit. But I promise we'll be slowing down probably too much later on.
Yeah.
So they move into these caves to avoid the Easterlings. In fact, let me go ahead and read this passage. It's a paragraph down here. Therefore, Anael. Now, Anael is the elf that told Rían that Huor had died.
That he would take care of. Okay, right.
And he's also the leader of this small little group of elves.
Right.
And there they lived a hard and weary life until Tuor was 16 years of age and was become strong and able to wield arms, the axe and bow of the gray elves. And his heart grew hot within him at the tale of the griefs of his people, and he wished to go forth and avenge them on the orcs and Easterlings. But Anael forbade this. Far hence, I deem, your doom lies, Tuor, son of Huor. And he said, and this land shall not be freed from the shadow of Morgoth until Thangorodrim itself be overthrown. Therefore we are resolved at last to forsake it, and to depart into the south, and with us you shall go. But how shall we escape the net of our enemies? Said Tuor. For the marching of so many together will surely be marked. We shall not march through the land openly, said Anael. And if our fortune is good, we shall come to the secret way, which we call Anon in Gelith, the gate of the Noldor, for it was made by the skill of that people long ago in the days of Turgon. So let's talk about that briefly. This triggers his curiosity. I mean, he's the what? The gate of the who? Made of the who?
Right. Yeah. But it's such a cool name, the Anon in Gelith. It's a great name.
Anon in Gelith, the gate of the Noldor. But I love I wanted to make sure we read that because that little prophecy that Anael has, the far hence I deem your doom lies.
Yes.
Very important. We certainly, that's the first of several times where it becomes clear that, there's going to be something very special.
Tuor has a destiny.
Yes.
He's meant for great things. And one of the things I notice about Tuor is that he listens to this counsel. He hears this wisdom from Anael, and he does listen to it. He takes it to heart, as we're going to see in the coming paragraphs.
Yep.
How much he takes this concept of the Anon and Gelith really to heart.
Yeah, he does. And I love his heart to go and avenge his people, but also his wisdom to know better.
Yeah.
He respects
he started out with that heat. He would have gone and done something rash, something silly.
Which, he would have probably taken a lot of orcs down. He was 16, he was strong, but my goodness, the things he would have missed out on, because he would have eventually been killed.
Right, exactly.
or worse, captured. So, well, needless to say, the march through the land does not go well. They get attacked. The forces get split, and they're scattered. So why don't you go ahead and take that passage that we've got marked for you there?
Okay. But Tuor's heart was kindled with the fire of battle, and he would not flee. But boy as he was, he wielded the axe as his father before him. And for long he stood his ground, and slew many that assailed him. But at the last he was overwhelmed, and taken captive, and led before Lorgan the Easterling. Now this Lorgan was held to be the chieftain of the Easterlings, and claimed to rule all Dor-lómin as a fief under Morgoth. And he took Tuor to be his slave. Hard and bitter then was his life, for it pleased Lorgan to treat Tuor the more evilly, as he was of the kin of the former lords, and he sought to break, if he could, the pride of the house of Hador. But Tuor saw wisdom, and endured all pains and taunts with watchful patience, so that in time his lot was somewhat lightened, and at the least he was not starved, as were many of Lorgan's unhappy thralls. For he was strong and skillful, and Lorgan fed his beasts of burden well, while they were young and could work. But after 3 years of thraldom, Tuor saw at last a chance of escape. He was come now almost to his full stature, taller and swifter than any of the Easterlings, and being sent with other thralls on an errand of labor into the woods, he turned suddenly on the guards and slew them with an axe, and fled into the hills. The Easterlings hunted him with dogs, but without avail, for well nigh all the hounds of Lorgan were his friends, and if they came up with him, they would fawn upon him and then run homeward at his command.
Oh man, I love that.
I love that.
Good
That's
boy.
so great.
Good boy.
That's so great.
Who's a good boy?
That's so great. Another one of those passages in Tolkien that makes me almost wish I was a dog guy.
Well,
Because that's really cool.
because there's not a single passage that makes you wish you were a cat guy.
No, that's just deep in the heart. That's in the heart. I do love that though. Just
I know.
We've had this.
This is
we've
the
had
running.
this conversation.
People will say we need to disagree more. We disagree on this.
We disagree on silly stuff like dogs and cats and Star Trek versus Doctor Who.
Oh man,
Good
stuff.
Yeah, it's really interesting. This first of all, I love this whole thraldom bit. It always
isn't it awesome?
This is a really goofy reference, but it always makes you think of the Conan the Barbarian movie with Arnold Schwarzenegger.
Oh yeah,
There's
I can see that. I can
the
see
very
that.
beginning, Schwarzenegger's chained to the big mill. He's pushing the big mill. I always imagine Tuor pushing a big mill for some ridiculous reason.
Yeah, exactly. Oh my goodness, I hadn't thought about that, but now I'm picturing it. You're right. And I'm hearing the cool music, too, from Conan. The movie may be cheesy, but Basil Polidorus' soundtrack to that, or score, is awesome.
Is that the name of the composer? It is a really cool soundtrack.
He's the same guy who did another cheesy movie but great score, Starship Troopers.
Oh, okay.
Great
I
score
didn't know
on
that.
one,
Okay. Yeah, oh yeah.
I love a good movie score.
Funny.
Anyway.
That's too funny. But yeah, for some reason, I'm sorry to put that out there, but that always makes me think of that movie.
Well, he's probably not quite as bulky as...
Not quite as buff as Arnold, no.
As Arnold was. And a little taller.
Yeah.
Arnold's not a very tall guy.
Isn't he's not? I didn't know that.
I believe Arnold is about 5'8". He's a very little guy.
Well, he's still taller than me, so there you go.
Oh, well.
But the other thing I like about this is, or I guess I don't like, but Lorgan, this vindictiveness that that he shows towards Tuor. He likes to
kind of cackling and rubbing his hands together. Oh,
because he just
Hador.
Right, exactly. But Tuor's response, man, this is one of the first things in just
ding, ding.
a long line of
this
great
is not
decisions by Tuor. Right.
Yeah, that's
exactly.
the first thing that came to my mind was
the first thing
Turin.
Oh, really? He can endure taunts? Wow. Okay. What might that have been like for Cyrus?
You're right. I mean, and I think we see that here with this sentence. But Tuor saw wisdom.
Mm-hmm.
He knew that there was no benefit to responding to these
doing something rash. To rising to this.
Exactly.
This
Take
taunting,
your time, make the plan, execute the plan, and he did.
Mm-hmm.
It took him 3 years, but he did. That's a huge thing.
Mm-hmm.
So now he's...
And there's so many of these things. I know I've talked about this before, but this is one of my favorite pastimes is comparing Tuor to Turin. And I won't do it every 5 seconds, I promise. But
it's hard not to, though.
It kind of is, yeah. I mean, all this stuff is so there.
It really is. It's in your
that
face.
We will have to call it out. We'll call it out when it's relevant.
And it doesn't help that
when it offers insight.
It's only there's only one chapter separating Hurin and this, and so
that's true.
It's so fresh in your mind when you get to this, that it's impossible to not compare the two. But
I really tend to see them as two possibilities of what the House of Hador with the House of Beor and the House of Haleth could produce. You could end up with a Turin.
Is it Tuor or Turin?
That's true. That's a good point. Yeah, it's exactly that. It's kind of like it's like an alternate reality version of Turin and Tuor, alternate versions of each other. It's a fascinating thing, and we'll see it time and time again.
Turin as he should have been.
There you go. Yeah.
So he's 19 now, right? Because he was 16.
I'm amazed how many Gandalf quotes you've managed to get in there.
Well, that's 2 so far.
Already.
Well, I'm sure we'll try to get some more
it?
in. I don't know. Maybe there was more. I don't know. It's just easy to pull them right out of your head, you know.
Yeah, it's true.
So he was 16 when he got captured. Now he's 19, and then we get that for 4 years he's an outlaw. So now he's 23, and we'll move on to the next passage here when he decides to move on. Yet another difference between him and Tuorin, right?
Oh, yes.
I mean, Tuorin, woohoo, I'm an outlaw. This is pretty cool.
This is cool. I like this.
Tuor's very different, and I'm going to go ahead and read the paragraph that tells us that. Okay. Now, Tuor knew that though fortune still favored him, you know what, let me try that again. Now, Tuor knew that though fortune still favored him, yet in the end the days of an outlaw are numbered, and are ever few and without hope. Nor was he willing to live thus forever a wild man in the houseless hills, and his heart urged him ever to great deeds. Herein it is said the power of Ulmo was shown, for he gathered tidings of all that passed in Beleriand, and every stream that flowed from Middle-earth to the great sea was to him a messenger, both to and fro. And he remained also in friendship as of old, with Círdan and the shipwrights at the mouths of Sirion. And at this time most of all Ulmo gave heed to the fates of the house of Hador, for in his deep counsels he purposed that they should play great part in his designs for the succor of the exiles. And he knew well of the plight of Tuor, for Anael and many of his folk had indeed escaped from Dor-lómin, and come at last to Círdan in the far south. Wow. So there's a lot there.
Yeah. Oh, there's
Ulmo,
so much there.
Yeah. Ulmo begins to become particularly relevant to the discussion here.
Yeah. He really starts to step in a big way.
Exactly.
And we see him really keeping an eye on things.
Yeah. He's gathering information. He's checking in with Círdan. And I love that he's paying especially close attention to the fates of the House of Hador. So he knows what's going on with Tuor. And we'll see why he's paying close attention to Tuor in a little bit. But
absolutely.
I wanted to, we talked about the Tuorin comparison, about the fact that Tuorin would never have thought that the days of an outlaw are numbered, and he was willing to live this way.
Yeah.
But
even when Beleg came along and tried to force him out of it,
Beleg to come join us,
Yeah. But also notice that Tuor's a different kind of outlaw.
Very much so.
Tuorin was I think his guys were right around Brethil area, so they were killing and marauding
everybody.
Innocent people near there. Tuor is an outlaw among the Easterlings, and you're still killing people, I suppose. You're still living a life of crime, but these are people who are in league with Morgoth. It's a bit different.
Exactly. And I love this little bit. He was unwilling to live as a wild man in the houseless hills. What was one of Tuorin's names?
Oh, that's
Wild
right.
Man of the Woods.
Wild Man of the Woods.
So wow, that's a Wild Man in the Houseless Hills. I just caught that as we were reading.
That's a fantastic catch. Wow.
So another Tuorin comparison. So
yeah, Tuor knows he's meant for something.
He does, and he doesn't know what yet, but he knows.
He doesn't know what yet, but he can't stick around in one place for too long without going after it.
Exactly. Big difference in that willingness. And I think that's key. So he decides to leave and try to look for the gate. So Shawn, if you could take that little next section for us, that'd be great.
Yep. Then suddenly it came into his heart that he would wait no longer, but would arise and go. I will leave now the grey land of my kin that are no more, he cried, and I will go in search of my doom. But whither shall I turn? Long have I sought the gate and found it not. Then he took up the harp which he bore ever with him, being skilled in playing upon its strings, and heedless of the peril of his clear voice alone in the waste, he sang an Elven song of the north for the uplifting of hearts. And even as he sang, the well at his feet began to boil with great increase of water, and it overflowed, and a rill ran noisily down the rocky hillside before him. And Tuor took this as a sign, and he arose at once and followed after it.
I love that. He doesn't question. He just
does not question at all. You're right.
Tuorin might have said, "This is a sign. I'm going to go the other way."
Yeah, right. Exactly. This sounds like a sign that's leading me to my doom. I'm going to try to escape.
Exactly. This is my fate. I'm going to go the other direction. Oh man, another big difference.
You can't control me, man. Tuorin answers to no one.
That's right. I bow to no man.
Yes.
Oh goodness. I love this. Maybe the third time that I can think of where we get somebody who's heedless of the peril. He sings this song. I'm thinking first was the rescue of Mithras.
Yeah.
And then Beren himself as he gets ready to go, solo before Luthien catches him.
That's true.
And then it didn't Sam.
Is there also one with Sam?
That's what I'm thinking.
Cirith Ungol?
Yeah, in Cirith
thinking.
Ungol, heedless of his peril. I think that particular language is used. I'll have to double check that, but I love that here.
It's the power of song. We've talked about the power of music since the very beginning, and
how Tolkien really, really hammers that over the head. Hammers us over the head with that over and over again about how important music is.
Yeah.
And even the music, even the water is like music here.
Mm-hmm.
So, good stuff. My goodness. So he eventually, we're going to skip a lot of the geography, but as you glance at that, you're going to want to use the map. Let's see. The stream grew as he followed it to the west. So we're talking about eventually start seeing the arid Loman. Those are a north-south range that separate Dor Loman from Nevrast there, if you're looking at the map. I'm sorry, they separate all of Hithlum and Dor Loman from the western shores.
Right. Yep.
So let's see. Let's go ahead. Yep. The next thing that happens is pretty exciting. I'm going to go ahead and take the next passage here. We get a couple of our old friends show up. So let's see. So where is he at this point? He's found a wall of rock. So he's found the mountains. He must be fairly near the Cirith Niniac.
I think he's near the Cirith Niniac. Yeah. Yep.
Yeah, he must be, because that's literally what he finds next. So he must be close to that. Let's go ahead and pick up then. So he sees these elves, and he stands up, "Howdy, elves!" So, okay, I paraphrase. At once they drew their bright swords and sprang towards him. Then he saw that they were gray-cloaked, but mail-clad under, and he marveled, for they were fairer and more fell to look upon because of the light of their eyes than any of the elven folk that he had yet known. He stood to his full height and awaited them, but when they saw that he drew no weapon, but stood alone and greeted them in the elven tongue, they sheathed their swords and spoke courteously to him. And one said, "Gelmir and Arminas we are, of Finarfin's people. Are you not one of the Edain of old that dwelt in these lands ere the Nirnaeth? And indeed of the kindred of Hador and Hurin I deem you, for so the gold of your head declares you." And Tuor answered, "Yea, I am Tuor, son of Huor, son of Galdor, son of Hador. But now at last I desire to leave this land, where I am outlawed and kinless." "Then," said Gelmir, "if you would escape and find the havens in the south, already your feet have been guided on the right road." "So I thought," said Tuor, "for I followed a sudden spring of water in the hills, until it joined this treacherous stream. But now I know not whither to turn, for it has gone into darkness." "Through darkness one may come to the light," said Gelmir. "Yet one will walk under the sun while one may," said Tuor. "But since you are of that people, tell me, if you can, where lies the gate of the Noldor? For I have sought it long, ever since Anael, my foster father of the Grey Elves, spoke of it to me." Then the elves laughed and said, "Your search is ended, for we have ourselves just passed that gate. There it stands before you." And they pointed to the arch into which the water flowed. "Come now, through darkness you shall come to the light. We will set your feet on the road, but we cannot guide you far, for we are sent back to the lands whence we fled upon an urgent errand." "But fear not," said Gelmir. "A great doom is written upon your brow, and it shall lead you far from these lands, far indeed from Middle-earth, as I guess." Wow.
Well, he's just prophesied the whole rest of Tuor's story.
He sure has. Pretty cool.
But there again, this great doom written upon your brow. These guys can see it. These are Calaquendi, it should be said. And really, can you imagine?
I love that difference that Tuor observes.
Yes. Can you imagine seeing, Calaquendi for the first time? He's been raised by Sindar, but these guys are hugely different.
Vastly.
Yeah.
Really cool. I mean, like Turin, he was raised with the Sindar, but Thingol himself, of course, being Calaquendi, and married to Amaya. But certainly not that he ever listened to her.
Right? No. Who did?
Who did?
No one.
Who did? Well, Hurin did. At the very end.
That's true. At once at the very end. But
what a great scene! I love this. I love Gelmir and Arminas.
Gelmir and Arminas are so great. I wish they had their own story.
Rosencrantz and Guildenstern.
I was just thinking of Rosencrantz and Guildenstern. Yeah, I was just thinking that. Yeah, it'd be great to see, how they weave in and out of these stories.
And their journey from Círdan over to Nargothrond, and great stuff. Yeah. Well, all the way up north and then back down to Nargothrond.
Yeah.
Good
so
stuff.
This is that scene where they, when we saw them encounter Turin before, and they said, "Hey, we've met your cousin Tuor."
Yeah, and you don't talk like him at all.
You don't talk like him. You don't look like him. This is it. Him. This is where they meet him.
Exactly. And it's a great little conversation. We're going to see more of it here in a little bit, but we wanted to stop there and just talk about the fact that now they're going to, he's found the gate and they're going to get him started. And then that awesome prophecy. And that not only is it going to lead him far from where they are, in Hithlum, but far from Middle Earth.
Yeah.
Well, that's a prophecy. So
that's going to be interesting to see how that plays out.
Yeah. Now, the passage we've marked out for you is a little bit later, but there is something I wanted to make sure we talked about. It's in the very next paragraph that Gelmir brings out a lamp, and that the Noldor are renowned for these lamps. They're made of old in Valinor, and the text says that neither wind nor water could quench them. And when they were unhooded, they sent forth a clear blue light from a flame imprisoned in white crystal. Can you imagine that?
Oh, yeah. Those are so cool. Actually, there's a work of art by Ted Naismith that depicts this very scene nicely, and maybe I'll put a link up to it on the website for this episode.
What other one we should put up is Tolkien himself had. There's a painting that he has that includes one. It's not from this story. Right. It's from the story of Turin, because in the early version of that, Gwyndor
had one, didn't he?
And it was actually the overturning of the lamp that showed Turin's the face of Beleg.
That's right.
So there's this really cool painting that's in Pictures by J.R.R. Tolkien, which was published a while back. I want to say 79.
70s, wasn't it? Yeah.
It was. It was shortly, not shortly after his death, but it was right around the time of the Silmarillion, right around the time of the biography. I want to say 79. But I'll have to see if I can find that image and maybe post that as well.
We'll put those up on the website, because they're both such cool images, and these lamps, I love these lamps.
What a beautiful concept!
Oh, they're all over the Book of Lost Tales. They're like the one thing from the Book of Lost Tales that I wish we got more of in the Silmarillion. There's actually a little bit in the notes. I'm looking for the notes in Unfinished Tales where Christopher talks about them a little bit. They're called Feanorian lamps because presumably Feanor made them. And it says the Noldor themselves did not know the secret, presumably because Feanor made them.
Wouldn't tell them.
Nobody else. Yeah, right. He would never do that. Described as crystals hung in a fine chain net, the crystals being ever shining with an inner blue radiance.
Wow. And like an iPhone, if the battery dies, you have to get a new one. So Feanor didn't tell them how to make them. He just kept selling them.
No, he didn't.
You need a new one? Here.
He just wanted everybody to go to the Genius Bar back in Valinor.
There you go. And
trade in their Feanorian lamps.
Upgrade in 2 years.
Oh, man.
So anyway, we wanted to make sure we got into that little piece because that's such a cool little thing that we just don't get in the Silmarillion, and really wanted to bring that in. But there is a passage here that I really want to have you read. If you could take that for us.
Okay. Yep. So this is right when they're about to depart. They've gone through this passageway together, and before they leave, Gelmir says this. But Gelmir said, "Yet I have heard that your house has the favor of the Lord of Waters, and if his counsels lead you to Turgon, then surely shall you come to him, whithersoever you turn. Follow now the road to which the water has brought you from the hills, and fear not. You shall not walk long in darkness. Farewell, and think not that our meeting was by chance, for the dweller in the deep moves many things in this land still. Anar Kaluva Tieliana." With that, the Noldor turned and went back up the long stairs, but Tuor stood still until the light of their lamp was lost, and he was alone in a darkness deeper than night amid the roaring of the falls. Then, summoning his courage, he set his left hand to the rock wall and felt his way forward, slowly at first, and then more quickly, as he became more used to the darkness and found nothing to hinder him. And after a great while, as it seemed to him, when he was weary and yet unwilling to rest in the black tunnel, he saw far before him a light, and hastening on he came to a tall and narrow cleft, and followed the noisy stream between its leaning walls out into a golden evening. For he was come into a deep ravine with tall sheer sides, and it ran straight towards the west. And before him the setting sun, going down through a clear sky, shone into the ravine and kindled its walls with yellow fire, and the waters of the river glittered like gold as they broke and foamed upon many gleaming stones.
Man, what a beautiful picture.
Oh, yeah.
What a location.
And it may not be clear to anybody who doesn't have the footnotes to the Unfinished Tales, but that Quenya bit that I read from Gelmir, Anar Kaluba Tieliana, which that actually means the sun shall shine upon your path.
That's awesome.
And so here it has. One paragraph
literally.
later, the sun is shining to illuminate his path. So it's not just it's a bit of a prophecy. It's not just a nice thing to say before as you're saying goodbye. So that's just so cool. It's such a great image.
I also find it fascinating that we get some Quenya here because, of course, they're not in Beleriand, so
that's true. So they're allowed to speak it. They can speak it.
Yeah, they didn't have to worry about the memo.
Thingol is not keeping an eye on them. Yeah.
Well, yeah.
Thingol might be gone by this point, actually.
Yeah, you're right.
I wonder.
No,
he's not. No, he's not.
No.
Tuor's still too young. Yeah,
of course
never mind.
not. Yeah. No, because when Tuor ends up crossing paths with somebody in a little bit, and so
that's right. Of course, yes. Yeah, of course.
I also love the comment, and this tells you this is a prophecy and not just have a great day. The dweller in the deep moves many things in this land still. That tells us something right there. We're talking that he's telling them, look, Ulmo is at work here.
Yeah, that's true. Stuff. That's true. Yeah, this is not by chance, right? Ulmo is moving all this. That's so great.
And keep in mind, they're directly involved in that, because they're carrying Ulmo's message. They're going to end up taking Ulmo's message.
They're on their way to Nargothrond right now, aren't they?
Yep. They're taking Gelmir to Nargothrond. Oh, man. I'm sorry.
Tuor, what do your man eyes see?
They're taking the Gelmir to Nargothrond. Oh, my. Good stuff. So I love this beautiful location they're at.
Is it the Cirith Niniac?
Yeah. And that's what he calls it. It apparently doesn't have a name, but he ends up giving it the name Cirith Niniac, which means the Rainbow Cleft. Not the Rainbow Connection. Okay, right. That's entirely different. Start singing that if you'd like. You're
now imagining Kermit. Yeah.
Oh, man, I can't get that song out of my head now. Okay, so cleft we all know is Cirith, like Cirith Ungol.
Right, like Cirith Ungol.
So, the spider's cleft. Niniac, actually, and I'm going to pull out some word nerdery here because you usually get to do that. I looked this one up.
Oh, good, because I didn't look this one up.
Yeah, Niniac appears to be a compound of nen, which is water, and the suffix iak, which is a ford, like Brithiac, or Brithiac, I should say. So iak, Brithiac. The Brithiac is a ford of gravel. So this is, the Rainbow Cleft. So this is the ford of water.
Interesting. And that's the word for rainbow.
In this case, yeah.
Interesting. Yeah, that's interesting.
Which doesn't make any sense to me now that I see it. Water and ford. I guess.
I mean, unless maybe
it's crossing. It's crossing, right?
Maybe Iak can also mean bridge. I wonder.
Bridge and ford. Because that would be a kind of like a water bridge.
Kind of like a water bridge, yeah. Maybe that's where it comes from.
Yeah,
or even if it's just a metaphor,
Yeah, crossing over from... Because he's looking at this rainbow going from one side of to the other.
Right.
I love that.
That's interesting. That's a really interesting etymology.
Now, the interesting thing I'm trying to figure out here is where the rainbow is for him. I'm gonna be... Okay, at morning and evening, rainbows are woven across the stream. Okay, so he doesn't. It's not like we're looking at a setting sun and the rainbows in front of him, because you all know that can't happen.
Okay.
If you're looking at the setting sun, the rainbow's going to be behind you.
Oh, that makes sense because
of the way rainbows work. But we get that
makes sense.
In the paragraph where we get the name Cirith Niniac, we get that the sun rose behind his back and set before his face, and at morning and evening, rainbows were woven across the stream, so they could be, properly placed.
That's beautiful.
So, Anyway, great stuff.
So multiple rainbows.
Multiple rainbows in the morning and in the evening.
A double rainbow.
What? Whoa.
Double rainbow.
Whoa. No. Just ones. I'm thinking of. I see these when I go to Yosemite, for instance, or any other place where you got like waterfalls. The spray is such that.
Oh, sure, yeah.
That you get a fixed rainbow, at certain times of day, just because the water's there. In fact, in Yosemite, you can get a moonbow, a rainbow with moonlight, at a couple of places. So
that sounds beautiful, actually.
It is beautiful. It's also stunningly hard to capture on camera. But it is gorgeous stuff. So we've digressed on rainbows, but it's the rainbow connection.
I've learned a bit about rainbows tonight. So there we go.
We're going to skip mostly, actually, the next several paragraphs.
Yeah.
But it really just describes his journey from the Cirith Niniac into the echoing mountains of Lamoth, about the Firth of Drengist, where Fëanor had landed and then burned the ships because he's such a nice guy.
Good stuff there, yeah.
Yeah, boy, yeah, having that nice little barbecue on the beach and sending a message to the rest of his kin. I'm your king. I burned the ships. I'm not coming back for you. Have a nice walk. Have a nice walk.
Yeah. Fëanor.
Yeah, I know. He's just
will we ever get tired of beating up on you? No.
I think we observed last time there ain't no candy left in that piñata.
No, there's no candy left in that.
Just ash.
We'll still find just ash. That's right. We'll still find a way to beat him up.
Oh, we will.
We'll find a way to bring him up in The Hobbit. I'm sure.
I'm sure. I don't know if we can successfully connect him to anything in The Hobbit. I will be pleasantly surprised.
Yeah.
He hears Tuor, not Fëanor. Tuor hears gulls, and he follows the gulls. They're beloved of the Teleri, which is interesting. So he wanders and follows them as he's climbing the cliff on his left side. He feels the wind out of the west. So looking at the map, you can kind of get an idea of where he is.
We should point out, gulls being a seabird, I think, clearly somehow representative of Ulmo, right? I see this as an intervention.
Oh, it's definitely an intervention. We'll get a more clear intervention with other birds in a bit, but this definitely is an indication, that he should be following them.
Mm-hmm.
So he seeks the gulls and he keeps going, and he ends up down this narrow channel. He ends up basically where the river goes into the sea, and there's the rising tide and the river going out, and basically he dodges death because the birds had kept him up kind of on the cliffs as he was following the birds.
Right.
Interesting little thing there. That must have been quite the scene to see this massive river, pouring out into this firth, and the rising tide coming and creating this clash of waters. Must have been just amazing.
Yeah.
So,
again, just some of the beautiful imagery that you can just kind of pick up on just from reading this.
Must have been really rugged.
Account.
I'm almost picturing something, for those who are familiar with it, like the Oregon coast, which is nothing like the California coast. You hear the California coast at a beach, you'd lay out on the beach, get a tan, go surfing, hang out. In the Oregon coast, you just try not to get killed by the waves and the rocks, and it's gorgeous, but it's the thing kind of gorgeous you want to watch from a little further away.
Gotcha. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it does. It does seem it's certainly treacherous, and we see that in
and cold.
I think, right? Yeah. And we see some of that right in this part.
We do.
He does almost get taken into the water, doesn't he?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, he would have had he not been up on the cliff's edge by watching the gulls.
Right.
So I'm going to pick up one quick paragraph, and then we'll move on again, because this is his long journey to Nevrast. Is what we've just walked through. But in this way, Tuor passed into the borders of Nevrast, where once Turgon had dwelt, and at last, at unawares, for the cliff tops at the margin of the land were higher than the slopes behind, he came suddenly to the black brink of Middle-earth, and saw the great sea, Beligire the shoreless. And at that hour the sun went down beyond the rim of the world as a mighty fire, and Tuor stood alone upon the cliff with outspread arms, and a great yearning filled his heart. It is said that he was the first of men to reach the great sea, and that none save the Eldar have ever felt more deeply the longing that it brings.
Wow.
Yeah. If we weren't sure whether Ulmo was involved before, I think we're pretty sure he is now.
Oh, yeah.
I love that scene. The idea of him being the first of the men to reach the sea.
To reach the sea and to feel this deep love for it.
And so,
Incredible.
imagine you're looking at the map. He's gone from, if we're back on the Loader Project, he's gone from Cirith Niniac through those mountains as the river goes through there to where the Firth of Drengist is. But he turned south from there and went down along the coast of Nevrast, and at one point ends up actually getting to the coast itself.
Yeah.
So somewhere between the Firth of Drengist and Vinyamar on the coast is where he encountered the ocean. So,
Yep.
so so he hangs out there for, far too long, right? We get that he remained through spring and summer the slow year wore on. Darkness deepened Beleriand. The autumn of the doom of Nargothrond drew near. So he's there for like 8 or 9 months.
Just hanging out.
Just hanging out in this really pretty place where he doesn't have to worry about the Easterlings.
I'm sure it was incredible.
It must have been.
But
he
eventually
been moving along.
No, but he shouldn't have been alone or that long, you said.
He should have been moving along.
It should have been moving along, yeah. I thought you said he probably shouldn't have been alone. I was like, oh, what part of the story did I miss? Yeah.
Being alone is perfectly fine. This is what a beautiful place to be alone, I'm sure. Rugged,
absolutely.
cold. He explores Nevrast, including all the way to the water in the middle, to the forest of reeds, to the great marshes of Nevrast around Lanaiwan. But he does end up wandering. He doesn't stay there because he can't really get to the. What's that?
No, just saying. I'm thinking it had to be beautiful. I mean,
it had to be gorgeous, yeah. And the birds and the animals that would have been there. He finds some traces of the old Noldor, stairways and ruined keys near the water. But anyway, so he stays there too long, and what happens? What do we get?
Well, I'll read this next passage here. And one day, as Tuor sat upon the shore, he heard the rush and whine of great wings, and he looked up and saw 7 white swans flying in a swift wedge southward. But as they came above him, they wheeled and flew suddenly down, and alighted with a great plash and churning of water. Now Tuor loved swans, which he knew on the grey pools of Mithrim, and the swan, moreover, had been the token of Anael and his fosterfolk. He rose, therefore, to greet the birds, and called to them, marveling to behold that they were greater and prouder than any of their kind that he had seen before. But they beat their wings and uttered harsh cries, as if they were wroth with him and would drive him from the shore. So, keep moving.
Get a move on, buddy.
Yeah.
Well, if you want to get a bird to kind of like nudge you along, get the geese instead of the swan. Those things are
those
mean.
geese, those things are mean, yeah.
They're just nasty.
They're the worst. This is true.
Here, geese, have some bread. I'll have your arms.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But man, talk about an omen. 7 swans flying in a particular direction.
Yeah.
This one that
was the token of your family.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. I mean, this is the stuff of mythology here.
It really is. It's pretty clear. So he figures it out, and he does recognize it's a sign, and he realizes he's waited too long, so he follows them.
Well, he kind of knows. I mean, he does know. He just kind of it's kind of like waiting for something. He's waiting for a sign, and he keeps on getting them.
Yeah. So he gets this sign and he follows them. He follows all the way down that line of cliffs, all the way kind of to the southwest there, along the coast of Nevrast. So he's journeying south, and it's a week-long journey. He eventually gets to the area where Vinyamar was, and Mount Taras, the westernmost of all the mountains there that separate Hithlam from Beleriand.
Yep. Still follow, the swan, and the swans actually lead him to the hall. Yeah,
they do. Each day they wake him up in the morning. There is an alarm clock, and they flew on as he followed after, and then they they just kept leading him along this way. Really fascinating.
Yeah.
Clearly.
Amazing.
Very, very inspired by Ulmo here. This is directly related to the prophecy. So
yeah, I mean, this is a thorough intervention.
Yes, it is. This is like, get a move on.
Yeah.
And he basically tells him that, as we'll get to in a little bit. But before we get to his meeting with Ulmo, he gets he picks up a new set of armor, right?
He does. Yeah. He comes into the hall of Vinyamar, and I love this. I'm not going to read this part of the passage, but I love that he wished not to awake the echoes in its emptiness.
Oh, isn't that a beautiful
I
phrase?
love that he kind of wanders into this hall, this deserted hall, and just has so much respect for the depth of history there. Just one of those things that I just love Tuor's virtue.
I do.
But yeah, so he sees something that someone's left behind, and I'll take this next bit.
Yeah.
Then Tuor, marveling, saw that on the wall behind the throne were hung a shield and a great hauberk, and a helm and a long sword in a sheath. The hauberk shone as it were wrought of silver untarnished, and the sunbeam gilded it with sparks of gold. But the shield was of a shape strange to Tuor's eyes, for it was long and tapering, and its field was blue, in the midst of which was wrought an emblem of a white swan's wing. Then Tuor spoke, and his voice rang as a challenge in the roof. By this token I will take these arms unto myself, and upon myself whatsoever doom they bear. And he lifted down the shield, and found it light and wieldy beyond his guess, for it was wrought, it seemed, of wood, but overlaid by the craft of elven smiths with plates of metal, strong yet thin as foil, whereby it had been preserved from worm and weather. Then Tuor arrayed himself in the hauberk, and set the helm upon his head, and he girt himself with the sword. Black were sheath and belt with clasps of silver. Thus armed he went forth from Turgon's hall, and stood upon the high terraces of Taras, in the red light of the sun. None were there to see him as he gazed westward, gleaming in silver and gold, and he knew not that in that hour he appeared as one of the mighty of the west, and fit to be the father of the kings of men beyond the sea, as it was indeed his doom to be.
Wow.
But in the taking of those arms a change came upon Tuor, son of Huor, and his heart grew great within him. And as he stepped down from the doors, the swans did him reverence, and plucking each a great feather from their wings, they proffered them to him, laying their long necks upon the stone before his feet. And he took the 7 feathers, and set them in the crest of his helm. And straightway the swans arose, and flew north in the sunset, and Tuor saw them no more.
My goodness. What a passage.
What an incredible passage. Thank you for that one. I love that.
Well, I knew you wanted it, and I had to give it to you because unfortunately I take a very big chunk coming up. So
yeah,
it was tough because I really this is what I wanted. But my goodness, what a beautiful section!
Such a beautiful section,
and so vivid. You can really see it. The long shield with the tapered bottom. The blue field, the swans.
You know exactly
in the front.
what the shield looks like.
It.
Yeah. Yes, you do.
Just gorgeous.
And he recognizes the weight of this moment.
Boy, doesn't he? And whatsoever doom they bear.
Whatsoever doom they bear.
This isn't just cool new armor.
Right. No, this is like this stuff means something. I'm going to take
doom
it. And
plus 2.
I'm going to take this hauberk of doom plus 2. Yeah. And, well, let's just put it right out there. He's accepting doom as opposed to, I don't know, maybe his cousin who's
going to
spend so much time trying to flee it. It's beautiful.
It is. I'd have to look this up. How long has, at this point, Vinyamar been abandoned? I'd have to...
Oh, gosh.
Well, it's the life of Gondolin minus 14, so I guess we can... how long did Gondolin survive? It's... minus 14 would be the thing. The city was...
I'll see if I can find that. It's been... has it been maybe 350 years?
First stage 126 to 510. So at this point, it's been like 370 years.
Okay, yeah, because Gondolin was founded around like 160 something.
So these... Yeah. I just looked it up and mentioned it, but now I've forgotten it.
Okay, no, it's fine. Yeah, that's what I was thinking. So between 350 and 400 years.
Long time. Mm-hmm. So this armor has been just sitting there untarnished.
Mm-hmm.
Beautiful.
Yeah. I love the swan wing on it.
I know.
I mean, and we saw,
and so connected with what brought him there, you know?
yes, absolutely.
And then the way the swans respond afterward, how they give him each of them
Give
plucks
them a
a feather
feather
from their
each.
wings.
Yeah,
That's just amazing.
beautiful.
I can't even.
That's beautiful.
That's so cool.
It's like a little piece of Ulmo to take with him and keep with him on his armor.
It really is. Just stunning. But this brings us back to chapter 15 of the Noldor in Beleriand.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah. Way back in chapter 15, we read this passage. Let's see if I can find the actual. Here we go. So Ulmo had said, now you're going to go to Gondolin, and nobody's going to find that against your will. Longest of the realms, it'll stand. Mm-hmm. But he says something very important. He says, love not too well the work of thy hands and the devices of thy heart. And remember that the true hope of the Noldor lieth in the west and cometh from the sea. We've talked about that a number of times. That's such a key turning point in the whole story. Is
yes.
This element that, that's not where your answer is going to be.
Yeah, you're not going to win this war with fighting. Yeah.
Exactly. But then he tells Turgon, what could happen later on, what good thing is going to come from it. He warns Turgon that, look, you're still under the doom of Mandos. I can't remove that. So eventually, and boy, is this foreshadowing or what, thus it may come to pass that the curse of the Noldor shall find thee too ere the end, and treason awake within thy walls. Then they shall be in peril of fire. But if this peril draweth nigh indeed, then even from Nevrast one shall come to warn thee, and from him beyond ruin and fire hope shall be born for elves and men. Leave therefore in this house arms and a sword, that in years to come he may find them, and thus shalt thou know him and not be deceived.
And then he actually described what.
Yeah, the text doesn't describe it, but Ulmo does.
Right.
The text, it says Ulmo declared to Turgon of what kind and stature should be the helm and mail and sword.
Right.
And that's exactly what Tuor gets to find here.
So I'm thinking the swan wing device on the shield. I think that was obviously Ulmo put that there because he knew that. Yeah. He knew that swans were going to be part of this.
Yes, he did.
So cool.
So amazingly
so
cool.
Great.
And I love the change that we see in Tuor. How does he put it here? That he had this, not only the acceptance of the doom, but that there was a change in himself. Where is that? I'm looking here, trying to find it. The change came upon Tuor, son of Huor, and his heart grew great within him.
There you go. Yeah.
It's subtle, but it's big. This is
he rises to this challenge that hasn't even been articulated to him yet.
No.
But he's stepping up, basically.
He is. He's really stepping up, and we're about to find out just how much. So he goes down to the sea. He felt called to the sea, and he sees the sun going down into this cloud, and it gets cold, and there's like a storm on the way. But he stands there.
Yeah, the darkening sea. Yeah, it's getting.
And then this wave rolls towards him. and it curls and breaks. I'm just going to tell you, I'm going to have to try to do Ulmo, and the text tells us, scary, that the sound of his deep voice that came as it seemed from the foundations of the world. I'm going to be lucky if it sounds like it comes from the foundations of my lungs, because I've been struggling with a little bit of a cold lately, and this is probably not my best time to try a new voice. But because, those of you who've been listening for a while know I've gotten to play around and do Ungoliant and Melkor Morgoth and Treebeard and
that's all right.
Who's probably my favorite.
This.
And Glaurung, but boy.
you've got this. You've got it. Go for it.
All right, let's give it a try.
I'm ready.
Well, I get to start with some narratives, so that's easy. Then Tuor bowed in reverence, for it seemed to him that he beheld a mighty king. A tall crown he wore like silver, from which his long hair fell down as foam glimmering in the dusk. And as he cast back the gray mantle that hung about him like a mist, behold, he was clad in a gleaming coat, close fitted as the mail of a mighty fish, and in a kirtle of deep green that flashed and flickered with sea fire as he strode slowly towards the land. In this manner the dweller of the deep, whom the Noldor name Ulmo, Lord of Waters, showed himself to Tuor, son of Huor, of the house of Hador, beneath Vinyamar. He set no foot upon the shore, but standing knee-deep in the shadowy sea, he spoke to Tuor. And then, for the light of his eyes, and for the sound of his deep voice, that came as it seemed from the foundations of the world, fear fell upon Tuor, and he cast himself down upon the sand.
"Arise, Tuor, son of Huor,"
said Ulmo.
"Fear not my wrath, though long have I called to thee unheard, and setting out at last thou hast tarried on thy journey hither. In the spring thou shouldst have stood here, but now a fell winter cometh soon from the land of the enemy. Haste thou must learn, and the pleasant road that I designed for thee must be changed. For my counsels have been scorned, and a great evil creeps upon the valley of Sirion, and already a host of foes is come between thee and thy goal."
"What then is my goal, Lord?" said Tuor.
"That which thy heart hath ever sought,"
answered Ulmo.
"to find Turgon and look upon the hidden city. For thou art arrayed thus to be my messenger, even in the arms which long ago I decreed for thee. Yet now thou must under shadow pass through peril. Wrap thyself therefore in this cloak, and cast it never aside, until thou come to thy journey's end."
Then it seemed to Tuor that Ulmo parted his grey mantle, and cast to him a lappet, and as it fell about him, it was for him a great cloak, wherein he might wrap himself over all, from head to foot.
"Thus thou shalt walk under my shadow,"
said Ulmo.
"but tarry no more, for in the lands of Anar and in the fires of Melkor it will not endure. Wilt thou take up my errand?"
"I will, Lord," said Tuor. And we'll stop it for there. We'll come back and pick up more, but really there's so much in this that I wanted to discuss.
Ton there.
Ton. Oh, man.
Where do you want to start?
Well, I want to start with a quick vocabulary lesson. The word lappet is one that I wanted to make sure people understood. It's a small flap or fold. So like the fold of a piece of cloth over a pocket maybe, or something like that, or just a little tab of cloth, So to Ulmo, or to Tuor, it looks like, he's casting this tiny little piece of his cloak.
Tiny little thing. But by the time it actually reaches him,
it's head to
a
foot.
Cloak. It's
Ulmo's
man-sized.
Almost big.
Yeah.
That's one word that I had to look up, and I wanted to make sure people understood that. Kirtle is just an outer coat, a man's tunic or coat. Earlier when he was clad in this gleaming coat, the close-fitted mail, then he had this outer coat of deep green. So, but yeah, now that we have that in place.
I love that description of him, though. I mean...
Oh, it's amazing.
Like the mail of a mighty fish, the kirtle of deep green, sea fire, it flickers with sea fire.
Beautiful.
This is one of the few times we see, such a manifestation of a Vala.
Yeah,
and it's so cool that it's so tied to his domain.
Oh yeah, he won't even set foot upon the shore.
Right,
I love it.
Yeah, and everything is oceanic. Everything is the fish mail. I don't know.
Probably
for some reason,
smells a little fishy.
Probably does. It's a good thing he's so far away. He's so big.
Well, and you're not going to tell him that he, smells of fish.
No. He can't smell himself anymore. He's been down there too long.
Yeah. I love the idea of the sound of him. I wish that I could do him justice in terms of the sound of his deep voice that came, as it seemed, from the foundations of the world. Mm-hmm. The visual and auditory experience that Tuor must have experienced there. And we can see what he does. He's afraid. He casts himself down in the sand. This is terrifying.
Yeah.
But
the term God-fearing comes to mind.
Yeah, it really does. This is, Moses with the burning bush. This is, this is terrifying. This is a God who could, or, a God with a little g. This is a Vala who could, crush you.
Right.
Without so much as a second thought.
Mm-hmm.
Not that he would. He has plans for him. And in fact, he chastises him for dilly-dallying.
He's not happy. Yeah, exactly.
I know dilly-dallying aren't his words, but still.
It would be hilarious if they were.
And setting out at last,
You
thou
have
hast dilly-dallied.
dilly-dallied too long, son of Huor.
Oh, man.
Thy dawdling has made... Yeah.
Thy dawdling. Oh, my goodness.
Yeah, I mean, he's definitely cutting into him for
Like, you should have been here, and now your road's going to be harder.
Yeah, you were. Yeah. I set this nice road for you.
Yep.
And you took so long getting here.
You just hung out and never asked, and really just kind of, what happened? Yeah. Why'd you stop? But
haste thou must learn. Like, okay, got it. Yes, sir.
Yeah.
Understood.
Nodding. Whatever you say, sir.
Yeah.
He mentions, of course, what's happened with Turin. My counsels have been scorned, and a great evil creeps upon the valley of Sirion. That's big. He gives him his job. He gives him Ulmo's cloak of hiding +2.
And I do love that cloak.
Isn't that awesome? And we get a lot of that cloak, so it's a very important piece. I also love this reference to the lands of Anar and in the fires of Melkor. Remember that Anar, the fire golden, is another name for the sun. So he's just talking about the lands of the sun. So, where it is here, cloudy and cool. Yeah. But once you get to the south and it's warmer, it's not going to endure there. So, but I think the most important bit is this last bit, which is why I think
he's telling him that. He's telling him that, isn't he? Because he's saying you need to just get on your road now.
Get on your way. Tarry no more.
Because this cloak is not going to do much in the north or in the south. Just go.
Right. The fires of Melkor and the lands of Anar. You got to get moving.
Right.
But then this most important bit. No, it's okay. Don't worry about it. We do that. That's what we do. Yeah. We digress and we interrupt. But this last bit really takes us back to our conversation in the last episode. Wilt thou take up my errand? I will, Lord. This may be his fate, but it is still his free will to decline it.
Exactly. Yeah.
And it is huge that he accepts this doom. And
he has to choose to accept it. And it is huge. It's huge that he does.
Just as he chose to accept the doom that the hauberk, the arms brought to him. Yeah. Really, really big. I mean, that's... we spent a lot of time talking about fate and free will, but there's another great example of that interplay.
Yeah.
And how, look, if Tuor wouldn't do this, Ulmo would have figured something out.
Yeah, that's true.
Probably. I mean, yes, he would have. Because that's his role.
But you're exactly right.
That's his role, as we'll get to in a little bit, which is yet more cool stuff about fate and free will.
Yeah.
That we'll get here in a little bit. So I'm going to go ahead and tackle the next chunk. And this is why I gave you so much of that last passage, because I'm taking such a ridiculously long section. But I think your Ulmo, we decided, was a little too bubbly.
A little too fishy. A little too bubbly. Yeah. Yeah. Hopefully that'll see the light of day someday.
I'm sure it will. Maybe check your outtakes, folks, in the next couple days. So let's get back to Ulmo's conversation here with Tuor.
Then I will set words in thy mouth to say unto Turgon,
said Ulmo.
But first I will teach thee, and some things thou shalt hear, which no man else hath heard, nay, not even the mighty among the Eldar.
And Ulmo spoke to Tuor of Valinor and its darkening, and the exile of the Noldor, and the doom of Mandos, and the hiding of the blessed realm.
But behold,
said he,
in the armor of fate, as the children of earth name it, there is ever a rift, and in the walls of doom a breach, until the full making, which ye call the end. So it shall be while I endure, a secret voice that gainsayeth, and a light where darkness was decreed. Therefore, though in the days of this darkness I seem to oppose the will of my brethren, the lords of the West, that is my part among them, to which I was appointed ere the making of the world. Yet doom is strong, and the shadow of the enemy lengthens, and I am diminished, until in Middle-earth I am become now no more than a secret whisper. The waters that run westward wither, and their springs are poisoned, and my power withdraws from the land. For elves and men grow blind and deaf to me because of the might of Melkor. And now the curse of Mandos hastens to its fulfillment, and all the works of the Noldor shall perish, and every hope which they build shall crumble. The last hope alone is left, the hope that they have not looked for and have not prepared. And that hope lieth in thee, for so I have chosen.
Then shall Turgon not stand against Morgoth? Is all the Eldar yet hope? Said Tuor. And what wouldst thou of me, Lord, if I come now to Turgon? For though I am indeed willing to do as my father, and stand by that king in his need, yet of little avail shall I be, a mortal man alone, among so many and so valiant of the high folk of the West.
If I choose to send thee, Tuor, son of Huor, then believe not that thy one sword is not worth the sending. For the valor of the Edain, the elves shall ever remember as the ages lengthen, marveling that they gave life so freely, of which they had on earth so little. But it is not for thy valor only that I send thee, but to bring into the world a hope beyond thy sight, and a light that shall pierce the darkness.
And as Ulmo said these things, the mutter of the storm rose to a great cry, and the wind mounted, and the sky grew black, and the mantle of the Lord of Waters streamed out like a flying cloud.
Go now,
said Ulmo,
lest the sea devour thee, for Osse obeys the will of Mandos, and he is wroth, being a servant of the doom.
As thou commandest, said Tuor. But if I escape the doom, what words shall I say unto Turgon?
If thou come to him, answered Ulmo, then the words shall arise in thy mind, and thy mouth shall speak as I would. Speak and fear not, and thereafter do as thy heart and valor lead thee. Hold fast to my mantle, for thus shalt thou be guarded. And I will send one to thee out of the wrath of Osse, and thus shalt thou be guided, yea, the last mariner of the last ship that shall seek into the west until the rising of the star. Go now back to the land.
Ooh, boy. And there's still more. So much cool. No, I don't mean more to read. There's so much more to talk about here.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, there's so much there. I mean, this is some of the stuff that, well...
This is why I want the whole story.
Yeah,
you know what I'm
know.
saying? This passage, this section is why you're like, wow, if I could have the whole story of the tale of Tuor and coming and the fall of Gondolin, what an amazing story that would be.
Yeah. I mean, I'm glad we have this part, because this is the only time we have Avala's own words about what their role is.
Yeah,
you know?
I love it.
I know.
That's
and so cool.
We're going to dig into that in a little bit. And this is almost by far my favorite piece out of Unfinished Tales. And Unfinished Tales has some amazing stuff. I mean, obviously it's got the Narn, which might have been my favorite prior to the release of the Children of Hurin. It's got the history of Galadriel and Celeborn, which is confusing. It's got that, Eldarion and Arendis, which is an amazing
That's a cool one.
story.
I like that one a lot.
Such a great tale. And I love the background we get with things like the disaster of the Gladden Fields, and we get information on Cirion and Eorl about the friendship of Gondor and Rohan, the quest of Erebor. We get more detail on that, the hunt for the ring. We get insight on the Druidine, the Istari.
The wizards. And,
it's awesome. It's a great book. If you have not picked up the Unfinished Tales, you must pick it up. Really, you
Definitely,
do. But wow,
but this is my favorite.
This is my favorite. It really is. It's so moving. It's so beautiful. It's so powerful, and there's so many of the rich themes that we've been talking about for a year and a quarter now. Yeah, and they all come to a head here.
Right.
So we get this history lesson.
Well, I mean, we're coming to the end of the story, and it's important that we have. It's unfortunate that the fall of Gondolin is so sparse. Because this really is the end of the story, and we really need to see the culmination of these themes like we're seeing here.
Yeah, and I'm so glad we see them here, because it makes the next chapter that we'll do all the more rich. and it's already a great chapter, but now we'll see so much.
Yeah.
I love that Ulmo is aware of his role, explains it, and he talks about this idea that in the armor of fate there's this rift, there's a breach in the walls of doom, and it's his job to be this kind of voice in opposition, this light in the darkness. I love that, the light where darkness was decreed.
Yeah.
So even though he looks to be opposing his brothers, his the Lords of the West, the other Valar, that's his job.
Yep.
So, and yet he realizes, I'm not going to be able to do this forever. Eventually, this thing is going to happen. So I'm working hard to do my job.
Well, and we've talked about how that job is, he's in opposition, but
it appears to be in opposition. Yeah.
It appears to be in opposition. But it is in furtherance of Iluvatar's plan.
That's the point. He doesn't say Iluvatar's name, but ere the making of the world is a direct reference, obviously, to Iluvatar's plan.
Yeah, and we've talked about things like the music. How the music is so much a part of Ulmo's domain, and I know we'll talk about that a little bit, probably in our next discussion. But it's really it's just profound. It's profound
really
that this role, how this role is just something that's been appointed to him.
Yeah. We get this. We also get this history lesson, which can you imagine hearing about those things from Ulmo?
Oh man, yeah.
I'm sure he told it in a way that was shorter than our episodes on those things, but still,
wouldn't take much.
It'd
be shorter than us.
Yeah, that's true. He could talk for a very long time and still beat our records. And I love that in implementing his plan, even Ulmo has freedom. We talked about freedom, free will. The Ainur. That hope lieth in thee, for so I have chosen.
Yeah.
Iluvatar may have a master plan, but Ulmo is part of that plan, and Ulmo's decision-making is itself part of that plan. Ulmo made the choice to choose Tuor.
So even the Valar have free will.
Yeah. Well, we know that because of Melkor's
Because of
fall,
Melkor.
Right.
Yeah.
But, I mean, here's another, and of Aule's rebellion, but
True.
subsequent repentance and all that. But here's just another example. We don't see much of that after Ainulindalë. Or at least not after Chapter 2 with
Aule, yeah.
With Aule. So great stuff. The reminder of Huor standing by Turgon and saying what he did, that prophecy. My goodness, and we'll talk more about that when we get to when Tuor gets to talk to Turgon about that prophecy. But he reminds himself of it here. I love Ulmo's response to him about what good would I do? It's like, look, if I'm sending you,
if I'm choosing to send you, then don't believe that you're not worth sending.
That's right. We talked earlier about God fearing and kind of the Moses burning bush. It's a little bit of that too. Moses was like, who am I? I'm not going to be able to say anything to Pharaoh. And God's kind of like, well, you're gonna. But all right, fine. I'll send Aaron to help you. Well, just like Tuor gets Varanwe to help him. It's an interesting little comparison. I don't want to go too deep down that road, but because it's still not allegory. Let's just be clear.
Right.
But it is very interesting that Tuor's self-doubt is stomped out by Ulmo.
Yeah, very much so. In a way that lifts him up.
Yeah.
That he, and again, it's because Tuor is who he is.
Exactly.
And he is willing to listen to counsel, to listen to guidance, to listen to fate, to listen to doom.
I mean, there's his cousin gets a message from Ulmo. Now, granted, it's not delivered by Ulmo directly, but still, he gets a message, and his response is basically, there is but one Vala with whom we have to do.
Yeah, and that is Morgoth.
That is Morgoth. Really radical difference. I love this reference to the valor of the Edain. Oh, man. This idea that men are willing to give their lives, even though they have such brief lives. It made me think there was a moment, goodness, way back in, I don't remember the name of which chapter it was, but I think it was the coming of the men into the West, when there was a leader of discontent.
Oh, that's right. It was Bereg, right?
Bereg, not Beleg. Bereg.
Right, Bereg,
that's
right.
I don't remember the exact line, but it was something about like, maybe this was the reason. Maybe it was.
Yeah, I've actually
it?
got it right here.
Very
It
awesome.
was, he said, so maybe it was for this purpose, to aid the Eldar, basically, to aid them at need, that we were brought into this land.
Yeah.
And then he said, let the Eldar look to it. Our lives are short enough.
Oh.
Again, this idea that, we're not going to fight. Our lives are short enough. Let the elves deal with this problem with Morgoth.
Yeah.
Um,
My goodness.
So,
but that's not what men do. Men are willing to lay down their lives.
Yeah.
Even when they're short. I have to say, I won't try not to read too much into that, but the idea that men had so little on Earth in terms of their life. They gave life so freely, of which they had on Earth so little. Makes me think that Ulmo knows a little bit about what happens when they're not on Earth anymore. That they do get more.
Yeah.
I don't know. That's another argument from silence there.
Yeah.
So
that's interesting. I also note that it's let's see, not for thy valor. Let's see, where was that? Yeah, it is not for thy valor only that I send thee.
Right, because it isn't. Your sword isn't going to help. I mean, it'll help,
right.
but it's not going to do the job. Your job is to bring into the world a hope beyond your sight and a light that shall pierce the darkness.
And first of all, I have no idea what he's talking about there.
None, Earendil whatsoever, Earendil.
No.
Earendil.
But I also like it. Again, it's a nice contrast with Turin, because remember how much Turin wanted to fight out in the open for his own glory, to show his valor, and how that always came back to bite him and Nargothrond and others around him. And we even talked about how he does this great deed of slaying Glaurung, but it's not for the greater good. It's not for the great war against Morgoth. It's really for his own vengeance and his own glory.
We know that because that's what he says when he goes to pull the sword out of Glaurung. He doesn't say,
"This is Tuor, son of Huor and Rían."
I've killed you because you're a horrible dragon and you've sacked Nargothrond. This isn't for Nargothrond. This isn't for Finduilas. This is for me.
This is for me. Yeah.
Anyway, and I don't want to sound like I'm beating up on Turgon like we beat up on Feanor. I think we were trying to be pretty clear about that at the end of that episode where, Turin's choices are, they're not motivated by the same level of full-on, I'm going to almost go to the level of saying evil that Feanor's decisions were based on.
They're certainly not. No, I agree.
Pride Turin is a problem, but...
Yeah, but Turin is all too human.
Very, very much so.
And all too flawed. I think
the deeply tragic character.
Yeah. Turin is somebody that any of us could be. Tuor is the person we kind of would want to be.
He's the hero. Yeah, he's a heroic guy willing to do the hard thing.
Yeah.
There's a line here. Oh yeah. Well, so there's this other line that I wanted to make sure we touch on. I don't want to go too deep into it, but I love what Ulmo has to say here. The last hope alone is left, the hope they have not looked for and have not prepared. Mm-hmm. There's some language there that we're going to see again in the next chapter. Not next episode, but next chapter that will be relevant. So just kind of keep that in mind.
Yeah. That is really key language, yeah.
It is. There's an interesting observation here towards the end about Ase obeying Mandos and not Ulmo. I thought that was interesting because I thought that Ase was one of Ulmo's...
Oh, that's interesting, that he was one of his Maiar, but he does say he obeys the will of Mandos.
Yeah.
He's a servant of the Doom, I guess, because the Doom has said that, the Noldor cannot come back to Valinor, and so Ase is the one making sure they don't.
Yeah, making sure those ships get smashed to bits.
Mm-hmm. That is very interesting. I didn't pick up on that.
Yeah. So he agrees to go. He ends up. We're not going to read it because are we running long already?
We do that.
We do that, don't we? He gets this really beautiful vision that Ulmo gives him. Ulmo blows his horn, and what are they called again? The Ulumuri.
The Ulumuri.
I love that. And he blows this single note that's so loud. The text says that to which the roaring of the storm was but a windflaw upon a lake. So, I mean, it's a big note. And this vision that he gets to see all the waters of the world, everything from the little rivers and strands all the way out into the deeps of the sea, the lightless depths. He sees everything, all the way even to the mountain rising up. He's seeing Taniquetil.
Seeing Taniquetil, yeah.
It's amazing. Absolutely love it.
I do love that vision. That's
beautiful
incredible.
Vision. I wish we could have covered it, but we just don't have time.
Yeah.
But I
Well,
noticed,
we gotta leave something for listeners to go and discover when they read if they haven't
I
read this
agree.
already.
I do notice, though, in the vision he sees what clearly is Taniquetil, but then later he has dreams in which the only thing he could remember was a vision of an island in the midst of which was a steep mountain. Behind it, the sun set, shadows popped up, and above it there's a single star.
Oh, wow.
This seems like a premonition, doesn't it?
Definitely.
This is the land of gift.
That is, yeah.
Oh.
I didn't pick up on that, but yeah, that's what that is. And the star.
And the star is even more important. I can't tell you about that.
We'll be getting to. Yeah,
I think that's fairly obvious.
I'm getting excited.
I know.
Yeah, it's it's going to be just a couple of chapters when we're going to see all of this.
Yeah, just 2 more episodes, 1 more chapter. We're going to be seeing. Yeah.
Arendelle, and then soon after that, the land of gift you were just talking about.
The land itself with the Mental Tarma.
So cool.
Going to be great, and I love how all this stuff ties
I'm glad
together.
you caught that because I didn't pick up.
I literally only.
There's
caught it
so
on this
much
reading.
in this section.
There is. It's rich.
Like
it's
really, easy to miss
rich.
stuff. Yeah,
it's very dense. This is like a really good chocolate mousse. You can only have a couple bites because it's just so rich.
Yeah.
So Tuor ends up meeting Veronwë.
Yes.
We're going to skim kind of the meeting. He meets him. He calls him out by name, and Veronwë's kind of like, yo, who are you?
How do you know me?
Do I know you?
How do you know that name?
And now that I think about it, you're a man.
Right.
So, but he tells him who he is, and then let me have you pick up part of that conversation for us.
Okay. So in response to the question of how do you know who I am, Tuor says, I know, for the Lord of Waters spoke to me yestereve, answered Tuor, and he said that he would save you from the wrath of Osse, and send you hither to be my guide. Then in fear and wonder, Veronwë cried, You have spoken with Ulmo the Mighty? Then great indeed must be your worth and doom. But whither should I guide you, Lord? For surely a king of men you must be, and many must wait upon your word. Nay, I am an escaped thrall, said Tuor, and I am an outlaw alone in an empty land. But I have an errand to Turgon, the hidden king. Know you by what road I may find him? Many are outlaw and thrall in these evil days who were not born so, answered Veronwë. A lord of men by right you are, I deem. But were you the highest of all your folk, no right would you have to seek Turgon, and vain would be your quest. For
I liked you before you said that. Now I don't like you very much. That's kind of what that is. But
this is not a good idea.
No.
For even were I to lead you to his gates, you could not enter in. I do not bid you to lead me further than the gates, said Tuor. There doom shall strive with the council of Ulmo. And if Turgon will not receive me, then my errand will be ended, and doom shall prevail. But as for my right to seek Turgon, I am Tuor, son of Huor, and kin to Hurin, whose names Turgon will not forget. And I seek also by the command of Ulmo. Will Turgon forget that which he spoke to him of old? Remember that the last hope of the Noldor cometh from the sea. Or again, when peril is nigh, one shall come from Nevras to warn thee. I am he that should come, and I am arrayed thus in the gear that was prepared for me.
Wow.
Veronwë's
eyes get all big.
Okay, all right, yep.
Well then.
Well then, it's that way. Let's go.
So that's how it is. Okay.
But notice, man. I mean, a lot of Tuor's speech that we see in these passages, this is inspired speech. This
it is.
Tuor saying words he doesn't know he's saying.
The next passage we read, marveled to hear himself speak so. This,
right.
He didn't know these things, and Veronwë was like a little bit shocked by that.
Right.
So, interestingly, Veronwë's very hesitant. He doesn't want to go back, but obviously he comes to the conclusion that, I guess if Ulmo said it, I better take you back. Yeah. So we're gonna skip quite a bit here because we do really desperately want to get to the gates, and we don't want this to run too long.
And fortunately, it's not a terribly eventful journey.
No, it really isn't. I mean, well, we'll see what we get here. There's this really cool section where he talks about what happened to him, and I'll read this a couple different paragraphs in this section. So he's talking about
Veronway's talking, right?
Yeah, Veronway's talking.
Yeah.
And he's basically kind of given a little personal history and a little history of Turgon's people. So he says, But when later Turgon heard of the ravaging of the Falas and the sack of the ancient havens of the shipwrights that lie away there before us, and it was told that Círdan had saved a remnant of his people and sailed away south to the Bay of Valar, then he sent out messengers anew. That was but a little while ago, yet it seems in memory the longest portion of my life. For I was one of those that he sent, being young in years among the Eldar. I was born here in Middle-earth, in the land of Nevrast. My mother was of the grey elves of the Falas, and akin to Círdan himself. There was much mingling of the peoples in Nevrast in the first days of Turgon's kingship. And I have the sea heart of my mother's people. Therefore I was among the chosen, since our errand was to Círdan, to seek his aid in our shipbuilding, that some message and prayer for aid might come to the lords of the West, ere all was lost. But I tarried on the way, for I had seen little of the lands of Middle-earth, and we came to Nantathrin in the spring of the year. Lovely to heart's enchantment is that land, Tuor, as you shall find, if ever your feet go upon the southward roads down Sirion. There is the cure of all sea-longing, save for those whom doom will not release. There Ulmo is but the servant of Yavanna, and the earth has brought to life a wealth of fair things that is beyond the thought of hearts in the hard hills of the north. In that land Nerog joins Sirion, and they haste no more, but flow broad and quiet through living meads, and all about the shining river are flag lilies like a blossoming forest, and the grass is filled with flowers like gems, like bells, like flames of red and gold, like a waste of many-colored stars in a firmament of green. Yet fairest of all are the willows of Nantathrin, pale green or silver in the wind, and the rustle of their innumerable leaves is a spell of music. Day and night would flicker by uncounted, while still I stood knee-deep in grass and listened. There I was enchanted and forgot the sea in my heart. There I wandered, naming new flowers, or lay a dream amid the singing of the birds and the humming of bees and flies. And there I might still dwell in delight, forsaking all my kin, whether the ships of the Teleri or the swords of the Noldor, but my doom would not so. Nor the Lord of Waters himself, maybe, for he was strong in that land. I'll skip a little bit, pick up more, and then we'll discuss all of this. So when the last ship and the greatest was made ready, I was eager to be gone, saying within my thought, if the words of the Noldor be true, then in the west there are meads with which the land of willows cannot compare. There is no withering nor any end of spring. And perhaps even I, Veronway, may come thither. And at the worst, to wander on the waters is better far than the shadow in the north. And I feared not, for the ships of the Teleri no water may drown. But the great sea is terrible, Tuor, son of Huor, and it hates the Noldor, for it works the doom of the Valar. Worse thing it holds than to sink into the abyss and so perish. Loathing and loneliness and madness, terror of wind and tumult and silence, and shadows where all hope is lost, and all living shapes pass away. And many shores evil and strange it washes, and many islands of danger and fear infest it. I will not darken your heart, son of Middle-earth, with the tale of my labor, 7 years in the great sea, from the north even into the south, but never to the west, for that is shut against us. Lots here, and that's why I wanted to read that much.
Yeah.
First, it really gives us a flavor of Veronway. You know, he was kind of hesitant all along.
He really, yeah, he was, and it's interesting how he has no love for the sea at this point. You know,
Yeah,
he
well,
really
now he
even
really
before
doesn't.
he really didn't even have much love for it before. He was happy to stay in Nantathrin. This is the land of willows that
and how beautiful
Treebeard
that
celebrated.
description. Oh man, that description makes me want to go there.
Yeah,
I want to take spring break and go hang out in Nantathrin.
Yeah, right, exactly. Yeah, one of Treebeard's favorite places, so it must be beautiful.
Yes, it is.
But you get this idea that he wanted to go to the west just to see the meads of the west. To see, he wanted the sea was just a a means to an end for
Yeah,
him.
yeah.
Maybe to see what Valinor was like.
Yeah, well, it must
That's
be better
interesting.
even there.
This guy was not a born mariner.
No, not at all. I partly chose the passage because of the beautiful description of the land, because we get to that's one of the things about this story that we don't always get in the Silmarillion, and that's we do get it in Lord of the Rings, and that's this rich, beautiful prose description
yeah.
of land, of just a place that
that's
creates
true.
a sense of presence that as you read it you can just visualize it so clearly.
Yeah,
a
very
real
much
gift
so.
of Tolkien's, and something we don't really get in a lot of the Silmarillion just because of its nature as a set of myths.
Right.
But it is beautiful, and obviously we talk about the risk of being at the ocean. Okay, sure, the ship may not sink, but sometimes you wish it would. But I like the comparison. I thought there were some points in here that made me think that Tuor and Varanwe are very much alike. They tarried on their journeys.
True.
And then there's this kind of little almost prophetic prophecy, prophetic.
He's prophetic, yeah.
Dude, prophetic, dude. Where he says that you're going to find that this place is lovely if you ever, if your feet go on the southward road. And because, of course, later on we'll find that he does end up there.
That he does do that, yeah.
And that there is the cure of all sea longing, save for those whom doom will not release. And, will doom release Tuor? No.
We will see. Yeah, and
I just spoiled that, but I'm
no, but yes.
Yeah. So I thought that was really worth touching on.
Yeah, that's great.
So then they were traveling. Oh, there's one last little bit here that I wanted to touch on, and then there's a passage I've got tagged with your name on it. So Varanwe sighed and spoke then softly as if to himself. But very bright were the stars upon the margin of the world, when at times the clouds about the west were drawn aside. Yet whether we saw only clouds still more remote, or glimpsed indeed, as some held, the mountains of the Pelori about the lost strands of our long home, I know not. Far, far away they stand, and none from mortal lands shall come there ever again, I deem. Then Varanwe fell silent, for night had come, and the stars shone white and cold. So not all prophecies are accurate. He prophesies that no one's ever going to get there.
No one will ever come there from mortal lands, and
I can't blame him for thinking that after a 7-year.
Oh,
journey.
absolutely! Absolutely, and knowing
7-year tour.
7-year tour to Tuor. The Tuor tour.
The Tuor tour. For those who don't recognize that slight tune, I don't know. There might be our younger listeners, especially our younger listeners, maybe who aren't, who are overseas. There's a television show called Gilligan's Island, and that was my very poor attempt from taking one of the lines of that music about a 3-hour tour to the 7-year tour.
7-year tour. I knew what you were doing.
I knew you knew.
I was right there with you. But
the weather started getting rough. The Noldor ship was tossed. If not for the spirit of Varanwe, the ship
Noldor
would have been lost. Okay.
Oh man,
that's bad.
He's close. His prophecy is
He's
he's
certainly,
close.
They wouldn't if it weren't for Ulmo's plan.
Yep.
To escape the doom, the breach in the wall of doom. Oh, beautiful.
I love that. I love that image.
Such a line. But now they've moved along, and we're skipping most of their journey and just doing the conversations.
Yeah.
They do find their way back eventually to the springs of Ivren, which are now this broken land and a marsh.
Broken.
So
yeah, it's just flooded out, and it's marshy, and it's just it's not the beautiful thing it once was.
Yeah, it's an unpleasant place. It's not. There's no File Ivren anymore.
Right.
But now we've got a passage for you to pick up.
Okay. Alas, has the evil come even here? Varanwe cried. Once, far from the threat of Angband was this place, but ever the fingers of Morgoth grope further. It is even as Ulmo spoke to me, said Tuor. The springs are poisoned, and my power withdraws from the waters of the land. Yet, said Varanwe, a malice has been here with strength greater than that of orcs. Fear lingers in this place. And he searched about the edges of the mire, until suddenly he stood still and cried again, Yea, a great evil. And he beckoned to Tuor. And Tuor, coming, saw a slot like a huge furrow, that passed away southward, and at either side, now blurred, now sealed hard and clear by frost, the marks of great clawed feet. "See," said Voronoi, and his face was pale with dread and loathing. "Here not long since was the great worm of Angband, most fell of all the creatures of the enemy. Late already is our errand to Turgon. There is need of haste." Even as he spoke thus, they heard a cry in the woods, and they stood still as gray stones, listening. But the voice was a fair voice, though filled with grief, and it seemed that it called ever upon a name, as one that searches for another who is lost. And as they waited, one came through the trees, and they saw that he was a tall man, armed, clad in black, with a long sword drawn. And they wondered, for the blade of the sword was also black, but the edges shone bright and cold. Woe was graven in his face, and when he beheld the ruin of Ivrin, he cried aloud in grief, saying, "Ivrin, File Ivrin, Gwyndor, Beleg, here once I was healed, but now never shall I drink the draught of peace again." Then he went swiftly away towards the north, as one in pursuit, or on an errand of great haste, and they heard him cry, "File Ivrin, Finduilas," until his voice died away in the woods. But they knew not that Nargothrond had fallen, and this was Turin, son of Hurin, the Black Sword. Thus only for a moment, and never again, did the paths of those kinsmen, Turin and Tuor, draw together.
Wow. There they are.
There they are. In case you didn't pick up on the motif of their lives going in opposite directions, here they are, literally.
Literally going in opposite directions.
Literally going in opposite directions. And it's still profound. I mean, it is,
deeply. Yeah.
It's, I read this and I think to myself, man, one of the best things Tuor ever did was not stopping to talk to him.
Yeah, seriously. Hey, you over there. Let's chat.
Can you imagine? Like, oh, you're the son of Hurin. We're related.
Oh, hey, what's up, cuz?
You're my cuz. Hey, let me come help you out. I'll help you on your quest.
Yeah, that would be
You'll
bad.
come help me on mine. Can you imagine?
Oh, what a disaster.
Oh, yeah.
Though then again, the minute Tuor says, "Yeah, I'm doing what Ulmo told me to do," Tuor's
like,
"Get
hey,
out of
wait,
here."
hey, I don't deal with any Vala except
Loser.
Morgoth. Loser. Teacher's pet.
He puts an L on his forehead,
Square.
Oh, man.
That's great.
You always do what the man tells you to do?
I'm my own man.
Man.
Make my own rules.
Authority.
Yeah.
Authority's terrible. All right, so we are already so over budget on our time, but we're gonna push through. They do, we're kind of skipping the journey itself. They do get there. It's hard. They have to use the cloak a lot. It's a long journey as they get across. Well, as you're looking at the map, they're going now. They've gone. Okay, you know that they were at the Springs of Ivrin. So now they're crossing that land there. They're crossing the Tiglan. They're crossing the Malduin. They're crossing that north-south road that runs from Sirion down to Nargothrond. They're going to have to cross the Sirion itself near the Brithiac before they can, turn around and try to get up into Gondolin there. So it's this kind of heading east across a very dangerous land right now.
Oh, yes.
Very dangerous. So that should be noted. And in fact, they do run into orcs. Tuor wants to attack them, but wisely, Voronoi says, no, not an option.
Let's not do that.
Let's not do that. And Tuor listens to him.
Listens to counsel.
And he says, then let them be. But I hope to one day not do that. I hope to not sneak aside. So they get across the main road. They cross stealthily. They use the cloak. But there's still, a hunt is on. They must have scented them or heard them, and now there's a hunt. They get towards the Brithiac, which we talked about earlier, this ford of gravel, and they wait. Voronoi doesn't want to cross because he can't really, he says, we're not allowed to do that if there are people chasing us. But then he spots the eagles, and this is interesting. Yeah. So Voronoi notices them first. What do your elf eyes see, Voronoi?
There you go again. There it is again. Oh, awesome.
Sure enough, he says, short is the sight of mortal men. I see the eagles, and they're coming. And so they kind of scare away the orcs and clear the way, so they head over. I'm really going fast now. They find a gully. They go up the gully. They find the mouth of the dry river, and Tuoran's like, this is the road to Turgon? I mean, I expected there to be a gate. Oh, don't worry.
Right.
There'll be plenty of gates.
Oh, you'll see a gate.
There's plenty of them.
There's gates. Don't worry.
But, this opening is, this path is kind of hiding in plain sight. But don't worry, the eagles, guard this place. And I love this line. I just have to mention it, that they alone save the Noldor, know the hidden kingdom, and guard the skies above it, though as yet no servant of the enemy has dared to fly into the high airs. No enemy has dared to fly. Balrogs, wings, just saying.
Just saying. Just got to get that out there. Just one more little reminder. Yeah.
So they do get eventually.
Somebody out there is listening. Is like, yeah, they had wings, but they just jumped really high with them. It's just like.
They were like ostrich wings. Just because they had wings doesn't mean they could fly. Come on, they're
like
wings.
Chickens, man. They flutter.
I'm picturing a Balrog walking around pecking the ground, breathing fire.
Yeah.
So they do get into this foot of the cliff. They find an opening into a tunnel, and eventually they get confronted. And this is fascinating. You wanted to point out this, if I remember correctly, that Tuor...
The language bit.
Yeah. Take that little spot, and then we'll discuss it real quick before we get to the gates.
Yeah. So I'm actually just looking for it.
We're moving pretty quick, so I'm like page after page after page.
Yeah, let's see.
This is what happens when we try to jam through a 30-page chapter in one episode.
Yeah, we're ambitious here. Sorry, bear with me.
That's okay.
A second.
I can take it, and you can talk about it if you'd prefer.
Nope, got it right here.
Okay.
And even as the echoes died in the stone, Tuor heard out of the heart of the darkness a voice speak in the elven tongues, first in the high speech of the Noldor, which he knew not, and then in the tongue of Beleriand, though in a manner somewhat strange to his ears, as of a people long sundered from their kin. So there's a couple of things here in this little linguistic note.
Yeah.
First of all, they're speaking the high elven speech of the Noldor, which Tuor doesn't know. That is Quenya. And, Christopher Tolkien actually even mentions, hey, by the way, that's Quenya.
Yep.
He says that in one of the notes. So we get that they are speaking Quenya in Gondolin. At least some people are. There's actually a late essay that Tolkien wrote. I haven't read it, but I've just read Christopher's notes on it, that Tolkien does say that Quenya was spoken in Turgon's house.
Yeah.
So it still wouldn't have been an everyday language, but certainly at Turgon's house it would have been preserved.
Right.
Right, and certainly it was still preserved as a language of lore to everybody else.
If Thingol doesn't like me talking in this language, he can come and find me.
Right, exactly, yeah. But what I really like about this is the idea of the other tongue, the tongue of Beleriand, which of course is Sindarin.
Right.
Their manner of speaking that is sounds weird to Tuor because they've been long sundered from their kin.
That's what happens.
That's what happens is, Tolkien spent, his life studying philology and understanding how languages diverge over time. I just think it's fascinating that even after a few hundred years of separation, and these are elves, by the way, these are immortals.
That's true.
But even after a few hundred years, there's already linguistic convergence taking place.
This isn't like several generations. This is, one generation because they're elves.
Right, exactly. You would expect, generations and generations of men to change their language. We've seen that, for thousands of years in the real
human
world.
Tongues, yeah.
But yeah, the fact that the Gondolindrum are already diverging, it's an interesting thing. I always think of how language is a marker for culture in Tolkien's world, and here's here's an example of that. Their isolation,
absolutely, and which we'll see even more of.
Yeah.
Let's see. So Tuor tells them of his errand. In fact, I'm going to go ahead and take this brief passage here. This is Voronway, actually, I should say. This is Voronway. He's explaining to an old acquaintance of his, an old friend of his who happens to be one of the guards. And he's explaining to him about why he's brought Tuor here, because Tuor's a man. This is probably a bad idea normally, and he's supposed to kill him. So Voronway says that...
As Voronway's been warning Tuor.
Yeah, exactly. Like, we may get to the gate and we might both die. But Ulmo's told us to do it, so I'm going to do it. So he's telling his old friend, what I have done under command greater than the law of the guard. The king alone should judge me, and him that comes with me. Then Tuor spoke, and feared no longer. I come with Varanwe, son of Varanwe, because he was appointed to be my guide by the Lord of Waters. To this end he was delivered from the wrath of the sea and the doom of the Valar. For I bear from Ulmo an errand to the son of Fingolfin, and to him I will speak it. Thereat Elemmekil looked in wonder upon Tuor. Who then are you? He said, and whence come you? I am Tuor, son of Huor of the house of Hador, and the kindred of Hurin. And these names, I am told, are not unknown in the hidden kingdom. From Nevrast I have come, through many perils, to seek it. From Nevrast, said Elemmekil. It is said that none dwell there since our people departed. It is said truly, answered Tuor. Empty and cold stand the courts of Vinumar, yet thence I come. Bring me now to him that built those halls of old. In matters so great, judgment is not mine, said Elemmekil. Therefore I will lead you to the light, where more may be revealed, and I will deliver you to the warden of the great gate. In other words, this is above my pay grade.
Yeah, exactly.
I do not want anything to do with this.
That is exactly what that means. That's exactly what I was thinking.
Let me get my manager.
Yeah, exactly. The boldness of Tuor there. Bring me now to him that built those halls. Bring me to Turgon right now.
Bring me to your king. Oh,
man.
We don't have any king.
We're an anarcho-syndicalist commune.
I'm taking it to be sort of the executive of the week. So they do come, and I'm going to have you actually take the first gate.
Okay.
We're gonna blow through these, but folks, please.
Oh yeah.
These are gorgeous prose
there's
descriptions.
There's 7 gates, and there's really not any themes or anything to talk about here. We just want to read these descriptions.
It's just beautiful prose, really.
Yeah. So the first gate is the gate of wood. Thus they came at length to a wide arch with tall pillars upon either hand, hewn in the rock, and between hung a great portcullis of crossed wooden bars, marvelously carved and studded with nails of iron.
There you go. And that one's actually fairly simple. It's a short one, but that's the gate of wood. And I'm going to take a quick little passage here that isn't anything about the gate, but is about kind of where the gates are. This explains kind of how this all works. Tuor saw that they stood at the end of a ravine, the like of which he had never before held or imagined in his thought, long though he had walked in the wild mountains of the north. For beside the Orfalch Echor, why does he have to make it?
There's two of those
things. So for beside the Orfalch Echor, I'm just going to Americanize that if you
just Americanize it.
Cirith Niniac was but a groove in the rock. Here the hands of the Valar themselves, in ancient wars of the world's beginning, had wrested the great mountains asunder, and the sides of the rift were sheer as if axe cloven, and they towered up to heights unguessable. There, far aloft, ran a ribbon of sky, and against its deep blue stood black peaks and jagged pinnacles, remote but hard, cruel as spears. Too high were those mighty walls for the winter sun to overlook, and though it was now full morning, faint stars glimmered above the mountain-tops, and down below all was dim, but for the pale light of lamps set beside the climbing road. So that gives us a vision of how the gates are set, or in what setting are the gates laid. Mm-hmm. So, okay.
So there's this road actually climbing up through the pass, up the side of the mountain a little bit.
Do you have any word nerdery on Orfalch Echor?
It means high cleft of the outer circle.
There you go. Thank you.
Yep.
Because I didn't look that one up. So now we've passed the gate of wood, and then you've got a passage here.
Okay. Some half-league from the wooden gate, Tuor saw that the way was barred by a great wall built across the ravine from side to side, with stout towers of stone at either hand. In the wall was a great archway above the road, but it seemed that masons had blocked it with a single mighty stone. As they drew near, its dark and polished face gleamed in the light of a white lamp that hung above the midst of the arch. "Here stands the second gate, the gate of stone," said Elemmekil. And going up to it, he thrust lightly upon it. It turned upon an unseen pivot, until its edge was toward them, and the way was open upon either side, and they passed through into a court where stood many armed guards clad in gray.
That's the first time I've realized it's not set on a hinge, but on a center axis.
Yeah, it's on an axis. It's like a
swinging door, or I'm not a swinging door, a revolving door.
It's like the hidden passage behind a bookcase in like an old horror movie or something in the castle. You push on it and it turns, and suddenly you've got a passage on each side.
But it turns on the center of its mass,
right.
not on an end. Yeah,
right.
You'll notice as we read these passages that even the guards are different. So
right.
Just be paying attention.
The guards match the gates, which
they really
love.
Do. Yeah.
Here we've got guards clad in gray.
Yeah.
To match the stone.
And that was the second gate. So now we're going to get to the third gate. After a little space, they came to a wall yet higher and stronger than before, and in it was set the third gate, the gate of bronze, a great twofold door hung with shields and plates of bronze, wherein were wrought many figures and strange signs. Upon the wall above its lintel were 3 square towers, roofed and clad with copper, that by some device of smithcraft were ever bright, and gleamed as fire in the rays of the red lamps ranged like torches along the wall. Again silently they passed the gate, and saw in the court beyond a yet greater company of guards, in mail that glowed like dull fire, and the blades of their axes were red. Of the kindred of the Sindar of Nevrast, for the most part, were those that held this gate. I love this. Every one of these is different. It's beautiful.
Yeah, every one. And there again, guards match the gate. So cool.
Yeah. So next up.
All right, so the next one, the fourth gate, is the gate of riven iron. Thus at last they drew near the fourth gate, the gate of riven iron. High and black was the wall, and lit with no lamps. 4 towers of iron stood upon it, and between the 2 inner towers was set an image of a great eagle wrought in iron, even the likeness of King Thorondor himself, as he would alight upon a mountain from the high airs. But as Tuor stood before the gate, it seemed to his wonder that he was looking through boughs and stems of imperishable trees into a pale glade of the moon. For a light came through the traceries of the gate, which were wrought and hammered into the shapes of trees with writhing roots and woven branches laden with leaves and flowers. And as he passed through, he saw how this could be, for the wall was of great thickness, and there was not 1 grill, but 3 in line, so set that to one who approached in the middle of the way, each formed part of the device, but the light beyond was the light of day.
How amazing is that?
I think this is my favorite one, actually.
Yeah, that's just pretty cool. The whole
idea of three different
grills.
3 different grills that are positioned so that when you're looking through the middle, they all create one picture, one sort of 3D picture together.
Yeah, what an amazing scene that would be.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, man. So now we get, now they're kind of at the top of the pass. They're now that the road kind of levels off a little bit. In fact, the journey from the third to the fourth gate was the hardest one they talked about. So, and now the mountain towers fell down towards the hills, and the ravine gets wider. The sides are less sheer, but now there's snow. This is really, we're high up.
Mm-hmm.
Now they passed through the lines of the iron guards that stood behind the gate. Black were their mantles and their mail and long shields, and their faces were masked with visors, bearing each an eagle's beak. Then Elemekil went before them, and they followed him into the pale light. And Tuor saw beside the way a sward of grass, where like stars bloomed the white flowers of Uilos, the evermind that knows no season and withers not. And thus in wonder and lightening of heart he was brought to the gate of silver. The wall of the fifth gate was built of white marble, and was low and broad, and its parapet was a trellis of silver between 5 great globes of marble, and there stood many archers robed in white. The gate was in shape as 3 parts of a circle, and wrought of silver and pearl of Nevrast in likenesses of the moon. But above the gate, upon the midmost globe, stood an image of the white tree Telperion, wrought of silver and malachite, with flowers made of great pearls of Balar. And beyond the gate, in a wide court, paved with marble, green and white, stood archers in silver mail and white-crested helms, 100 upon either hand. Then Elemekil led Tuor and Voronoi through their silent ranks, and they entered upon a long white road that ran straight towards the 6th gate, and as they went, the grass sward became whiter, and among the white stars of Uilos there opened many small flowers like eyes of gold. My goodness,
that's so cool.
such a potent visual image.
Yeah, yeah. There's nothing like this in the Silmarillion.
None. I know.
As everyone listening knows by now, but yeah, that's why this is just so incredible.
I mean, if you prefer, we could read from the map chapter.
Or we could just read the 2 pages of this that was in the
Seriously,
the 2 pages that this constituted in the
This
Silmarillion.
is so beautiful. This I'm just picturing. I mean, I know that the last gate might have been my favorite, but I love the plaza behind in this one. This idea of the court paved with green and white marble. You've got 100 archers wearing silver mail and white crested helms, and grass finally. Because you're not in the middle of the narrow part of the ravine. So now you've got these big grass swords with the white stars of Uilos and now little golden flowers in the field. Oh,
yeah.
I just hang out there for a while. But anyway.
Also, for anybody listening at home, which I hope we've got a few people, Uilos is the same flower that the Rohirrim called Cymbalmyrna.
Yep, Cymbalmyrna. Or Edelweiss, most likely.
Is it really?
I'm thinking it is. I mean, just the way they describe it, it sounds like Edelweiss.
Well, yeah, Evermind. Yeah, interesting.
I don't know. I could totally be wrong. I am guessing. I'm pulling that one right out of my ear.
We'll have to look that one up.
Yeah.
And confirm that. So we're on to the Golden Gate, aren't we?
We are.
Not the bridge.
Thank you. Yes, not the bridge in San Francisco.
So they came to the Golden Gate, the last of the ancient gates of Turgon that were wrought before the Nirnaeth. And it was much like the Gate of Silver, save that the wall was built of yellow marble, and the globes and parapet were of red gold. And there were 6 globes, and in the midst, upon a golden pyramid, was set an image of Laurelin, the tree of the sun, with flowers wrought of topaz and long clusters upon chains of gold. And the gate itself was adorned with discs of gold, many rayed, in likenesses of the sun, set amid devices of garnet and topaz and yellow diamonds. In the court beyond were arrayed 300 archers with long bows, and their mail was gilded, and tall golden plumes rose from their helmets, and their great round shields were red as flame.
What a picture. So if you got past the 200 archers at the last gate, you got 300 to say hi here. It's a short road from there to the 7th gate. Now, that Golden Gate was the last one built by Turgon when the city was founded. But after the Nirnaeth, Maeglin built the 7th gate, the Gate of Steel. No wall stood there, but on either hand were 2 round towers of great height, many-windowed, tapering in 7 stories to a turret of bright steel. And between the towers there stood a mighty fence of steel that rusted not, but glittered cold and white. 7 great pillars of steel there were, tall with the height and girth of strong young trees, but ending in a bitter spike that rose to the sharpness of a needle. And between the pillars were 7 crossbars of steel, and in each space 7 times 7 rods of steel upright, with heads like the broad blades of spears. But in the center, above the midmost pillar and the greatest, was raised a mighty image of the king helm of Turgon, the crown of the hidden kingdom, set about with diamonds. No gate or door could Tuor see in this mighty hedge of steel, but as he drew near through the spaces between its bars, there came, as it seemed to him, a dazzling light, and he shaded his eyes, and stood still in dread and wonder. But Elemekil went forward, and no gate opened to his touch, but he struck upon a bar, and the fence rang like a harp of many strings, giving forth clear notes in harmony that ran from tower to tower. Wow.
Man.
Even Maeglin can build something amazing.
This one's scary.
I mean, the steel and the
still, it's still beautiful, but I mean, bitter and cold and intimidating is definitely the image you get of this one.
It's definitely more utilitarian.
Absolutely,
But the idea, I think what made me kind of wow was the fact that he strikes upon a bar and the fence rings like a harp. That's pretty amazing.
Yeah, that's pretty cool. Yeah.
So what happens when that happens?
All right. Well, straightway there issued riders from the towers, but before those of the north tower came one upon a white horse, and he dismounted and strode towards them. And high and noble as was Elemekil, greater and more lordly was Ecthelion, lord of the fountains, at that time warden of the great gate. All in silver was he clad, and upon his shining helm there was set a spike of steel pointed with a diamond, and as his esquire took his shield, it shimmered as if it were bedewed with drops of rain that were indeed 1,000 studs of crystal.
My goodness. And yes, this is the Icthelion who we'll see more of and then less of in the next episode.
Oh.
I know. Icthelion's pretty amazing.
He's one I wish I knew better. It's unfortunate that we get virtually nothing of him. This
is all we get. I mean, he turns to Tuor. Tuor wraps his cloak around him, and it seems that there's like a mist around him, and he gets really tall. But then I'll pick up from there. But Icthelion bent his bright glance upon Tuor, and after a silence he spoke gravely, saying, "You have come to the last gate. Know then that no stranger who passes it shall ever go out again, save by the door of death. Speak not ill-boding. If the messenger of the Lord of Waters go by that door, then all those who dwell here will follow him. Lord of the Fountains, hinder not the messenger of the Lord of Waters." Then, I know, it's like, whoa.
And it's like, Waters trumps fountains, Icthelion.
Waters trumps fountains. Who are you? Then Varanwe and all those who stood near looked again in wonder at Tuor, marveling at his words and voice. And to Varanwe it seemed as if he heard a great voice, but as of one who called from afar off. But to Tuor it seemed that he listened to himself speaking as if another spoke with his mouth. For a while Icthelion stood silent, looking at Tuor, and slowly awe filled his face, as if in the gray shadow of Tuor's cloak he saw visions from far away. Then he bowed, and went to the fence and laid hands upon it, and gates opened inward on either side of the pillar of the crown. Then Tuor passed through, and coming to a high sword that looked out over the valley beyond, he beheld a vision of Gondolin amid the white snow. And so entranced was he that for long he could look at nothing else, for he saw before him at last the vision of his desire out of dreams of longing. Thus he stood and spoke no word. Silent upon either hand stood a host of the army of Gondolin. All of the 7 kinds of the 7 gates were there represented, but their captains and chieftains were upon horses, white and gray. Then, even as they gazed on Tuor in wonder, his cloak fell down, and he stood there before them in the mighty livery of Nevrast. And many were there who had seen Turgon himself set these things upon the wall behind the high seat of Vinumar. Then Icthelion said at last, "Now no further proof is needed, and even the name he claims as son of Huor matters less than this clear truth, that he comes from Ulmo himself." Yeah.
That's it.
that pretty much, that does it right there.
That does it, yep.
Wow.
The proof, Icthelion showing some wisdom here.
Yeah, he recognizes. He was. Yeah. I'm sure he was there. He must have been one of the ones who watched Turgon, put that equipment back there and go.
If anybody was there, he had to be, because he is such a high-ranking noble.
Yeah, exactly. And, I mean, so high-ranking that he even has an esquire to take his diamond shield.
Right. Yeah.
Remember we talked about diamonds in the last episode. We were like. It was gilding the lily, He was putting the Silmaril in the.
That's right.
Now you've got the Nauglamir, and here it's like, I've got diamonds on my shield.
You've got a diamond shield for your captain of the. Yeah. For your captain of the guard of the at the gate that nobody's supposed to get to anyway.
Yeah, exactly. You can afford to have a little ceremony instead of functional stuff, but.
Yeah.
My goodness, this was a lot longer than we intended, but that does wrap it up for another episode of the Prancing Pony Podcast. As always, thank you so much for joining us. Be sure to join us again in 1 week when we do what we said we'd do this time and cover Chapter 23 of Tuor and the Fall of Gondolin.
And we will finish the story and get to the fall that time, we promise. Believe me, I want to get to Chapter 24 as much as anybody does.
More than most people, I suspect.
Maybe so. And if you don't know why I'm so excited, well, you are in for a treat. Yeah. Remember, if you're reading along and like to take notes as much as we do, don't mark up your first edition hardcovers. Do what Alan does and go to the official library tab on our website, theprancingponypodcast.com, where you can find links to cheap paperbacks of Tolkien's works, as well as audiobooks, music CDs, and some other cool things for your Tolkien collection. And if you buy through those links, you'll even be helping us to support this show without costing you a penny more.
Yep. And you can also support us by leaving a review on iTunes. Even if you don't listen to us on iTunes, you can still leave us a review as long as you have an Apple ID. It only takes a few moments. It's really easy to do, and we're super appreciative. Some of you have said some incredibly kind things there, and we really do thank you for it.
Yes, we do. And if you haven't done so already, you may subscribe on iTunes or through your favorite podcast app. You can find our RSS feed on our website or find us on Google Play, TuneIn, Stitcher, and most other podcast directories.
And a big thank you to those of you who are connecting with us on social media. We set out to start this conversation that everyone could join, and that's why we call this The Prancing Pony. And it's why we have the online common room on Facebook at The Prancing Pony Podcast and on Twitter at Prancing Pony Pod.
And social media is a great place to share our podcast as well. So please retweet us, share us, tell your friends. And thank you to those of you who are doing that.
Absolutely. And one last thing, as always, don't forget to send your questions, comments, or pictures of the 7 gates in front of your house to the prancingponypodcast@gmail.com. And
if anybody's got a Writhen Iron Gate, I want to see it.
I'm more interested in that Golden Gate, but not the one in San Francisco. And we will try to get him into our next episode. Well, 2.5 hours is still far too short a time to spend among such admirable listeners. But until next time.
Farewell, friends.